What are the scariest facts that people outside your profession don't know? Story 1. I used to work in banking, and it was eye-opening to see how many people were victims of fraud, how little recourse there is to get the money back, and how little the police can do for you. My girlfriend recently got a job at a credit union, and I hear stories every day of someone trying to scrounge up money to put a bankrupt account back in good standing. London police got the pickpocket who swiped my credit card on camera. He used the card in several locations across the city, but unless he also used it in the same bureau that he stole it, the police couldn't get the footage. That's not how real card fraud works. That's petty stuff. I think this is more along the lines of online identity theft, where people will use your card information for very large purchases online. To the banks, it's more cost-efficient to just let it go and give the money to the customer than to fix the system. Most likely, your info is already stolen. The safety comes from the fact that millions of us have had our ID stolen, but only a select few of the stolen are actually utilized. I've been in banking for 10 years now. I was in customer service for 3 years. We always were able to retrieve the customer's money that was lost due to fraud. I honestly cannot think of one time we weren't able to. Scams, on the other hand, we were able to do exactly nothing about. The key difference between both is, did the customer know and willingly hand over the funds? If they did, then it was a scam and we couldn't do anything about it. If not, then it was fraud, theft, and we would be able to make the customer whole. If that definition isn't clear enough, it's the difference between getting pickpocketed and buying some speakers in a Best Buy parking lot. I had a card cloned and a PIN used on my debit card several states away. I had a dispute with my bank for almost a month to get my money back. An hour before the fraud happened, I used my card at a local CVS in Pittsburgh. The bank was not immediately siding with me and still thought I somehow within that hour got on a plane, landed in Chicago, and made it to some mall that did not have a security camera to withdraw the rest of my money. I eventually got my money back, but they did a full-on investigation, and that's how I even knew the ATM that was used did not have a working camera as they tried to get footage. I switched banks after that since that was pure BS, and it put me in a major bind since my bank account was drained shortly after payday. I've been a cop and work in the financial crimes investigation for a bank now. It's amazing how hard it is from the police side to track fraudulent funds. I've tried and subpoena bank records that just go to a dead end. From the bank side, it's amazing how many people willingly give up money to what appears to be obvious scams. The number of people who think they're in online relationships with celebrities less than half their age, who then need gift cards, is mind-boggling. The really sad ones are the work-from-home scams. They tell a person they have to buy a laptop for their new job, then send it to the company for software or something, and they'll be reimbursed, except that shiny new MacBook is just gone now. There are people who have no idea that a legitimate business provides the equipment, and when you don't know things like that, it sounds believable. I felt the most bad for these folks because they weren't trying to get rich quickly, they just wanted to work. Story 2. As a librarian, you'd be horrified at how many books we get returned and have to throw out because they're absolutely covered in bedbugs. We put a block on accounts and notified patrons, but I was specifically told not to mention this problem to the public whatsoever by management. However, I will say for anyone worried, don't be. If bedbugs were going around the library, your librarians would be the first to know, because if anyone, we handle the books and have our personal effects around them the most. On the flip side, I will add, like anywhere, some managers and their policies are idiotic. Our protocol for roaches in CDs or bedbugs in books was to wrap them up and put them in the freezer until the circulation leader came in, like on top of the employee's food. As a former full-time bug guy, it's the eggs you have to worry about. While visible to the naked eye, just barely, they can be easily missed and be present with no bugs in sight. I was never really a library person until I started taking my toddler, and this genuinely has me concerned, and I would have never thought about it as a vector for infestation. I've had customers in the past who have no idea how they got them. Didn't travel, didn't have anyone stay with them, didn't go to the movie theater, no used items or anything, but this I never thought to ask. Wild. That's what I've heard, but if it helps, we've never had complaints of anything traced back to our materials for our or any other system. I think Circulation does a good job in their checks. Also, if you ever want to talk to your city or council, about removing late fees, we've had a lot more materials that could pose problems weeded out for us by not charging late fees. Having a policy of forgiving reasonable accidents, so now people will call us and be like, hey, my house got treated for bed bugs, and we're like, cool, keep them, instead of getting them back and having to throw them out, and we actually get a lot more books back in general. I find it very concerning the insane number of people I personally run into that say things like, haven't been in a library since I was a kid, haven't read a book since middle school, thought I'd check it out. And I'm fully aware that these people are the lovely, shining exceptions that decide they want to change that and actually seek out something to read. It makes me really concerned about the overall literacy skills of the general public, especially when it comes to voting and advocating for issues like ranked choice voting or universal healthcare. If people genuinely cannot understand complex ideas, they're not going to push for them. But I do have nightmares about bedbugs. Story 3. Supply coordinator for a hospital here. Our supplies are ridiculously cheap. That IV that you were charged $1,000 for, we paid 79 cents for it. We get diapers for about $1 per case. I coordinated supplies for the Air Force for a bit. There's a reason our budget is so big. We have to pay $300 each for D-cell batteries. Energizer style, not any fancy kind. Everyone freaked out over our $1,000 hot cups, but no one notices our $30 screws, $400 for the titanium ones, or $700 bare bones office chairs. The DoD and Congress love to talk about veteran plus active duty personal costs, but never really notice when contracts are forcing us to pay exorbitant costs for everyday items. Contracts they probably had a hand in making, and will give benefits to the signatory on retirement. I might be ignorant of the true nature of this, but what it looks like, and from things I've read, they do this because of insurance. It's a long and screwed up process, but basically the hospitals are not getting enough to operate regularly. But if they didn't have so much overhead and bonuses to shell out, things would be better. So they take advantage of the insurance and then negotiate their payments, and the rest is passed on to the consumer. Also, I believe Medicare has hard limits for what they pay, and they use that as a reason to jack up the price elsewhere. To add to this, having worked in the medical field, some of the nicest, most church-going moms and nurses or other workers are the meanest, crap-talking people behind your back. I blame the Teams app, but I've seen them say, "Hey girl," and then talk about that person's worst time in their life without realizing how crummy they're being, while thinking they are so self-righteous. It's crazy, but they are definitely talking crap about you after comforting you. They made fun of a nice woman's lady smells and her pH being off for years, and I should not have known any of this being a dude. These ladies are cruel and still call you babe as nurses after surgery. This is incredibly misleading. You are comparing raw material to the cost of a finished service. To start with, the average change for an IV infusion is $200 to $1,000 depending on how long the treatment is. So $1,000 is the extreme case. Yes, the IV liquid costs a very small amount of money, but that charge is also paying for the doctor who authorized it, the nurse who set up the IV, the equipment used to deliver the IV, the hospital's own liability insurance for doing this process, all the paperwork and record keeping that goes along with it, the billing department that works to get the hospital paid. The list goes on and on. OP is a supply coordinator, a job that has to exist, and your salary is paid for from that mark too. Whenever you hear these crazy sounding stories, ask yourself, if the hospital is really charging a 10,000% markup on everything, why don't hospitals have a 10,000% profit margin? When we look at actual data, we see that the median hospital operatives have a margin of only 0.7%. So of that $200 to $1,000 they charge you for the IV, the hospital is paying $198.60 to $993. Story 4. Climbing into an unventilated manhole can kill you in seconds, and you wouldn't even know anything was seriously wrong. Do you think that's the air you're breathing now? Manholes can fill with gases that are heavier than breathable air. You think you are breathing normally, but instead you fall unconscious and suffocate from a lack of oxygen. Yeah, you know that feeling that you get that you really need to breathe if you hold your breath for a while? That's not due to your body feeling the need for oxygen. It's your body feeling that it's got too much carbon dioxide in the lungs. If you're breathing a gas mixture that doesn't contain CO2, then you won't feel like you're running out of breath. You'll just pass out and die. My fiance works on a ship and told me a story of how some cleaning chemicals in an airlocked storage room spilled and combined. Or it might have been something rotted and combined with something else. A sailor went down to check for something, passed out, and died. Another went to look for him, assumedly saw him passed out, ran in, passed out, and died. The third man came, saw them passed out, took 2 cautious steps in, almost passed out, and then managed to get out and call for help. It took hours for the room to be declared safe again. Remember first aid training. If you see someone passed out, look around first to see if you can identify a threat or a cause. Most of the time people pass out because of internal things, but you always want to make sure the area is safe. Regardless, this situation was tragic and unfortunate. The exact same thing happens depressingly often with slurry/manure pits on farms, despite every farmer knowing how dangerous they are. Unfortunately, it just takes one person to forget their equipment, or think that they'll be fast, so they don't need to follow procedure, and then another 1 or 2 or 3 victims follow, trying to rescue the first guy. The would-be rescuers almost invariably know better, but irrationally attempt to do so anyway because tragically the person they're trying to rescue is often a family member. Slightly different mechanisms, but the same end result. I'm assuming the chemical reaction, edit on the ship, likely produced chlorine gas or hydrogen sulfide. Although on a commercial ship, who knows what chemicals they might use, versus primarily methane asphyxiation in a manure pit. Could also be hydrogen sulfide, CO2, or ammonia depending on the farm. In 20+ years as a vet, I think there have been 3 separate incidents resulting in 7 to 8 total fatalities at farms within our coverage area. And there are countless others. Damn near every farmer and vet I know knows of similar tragedies. Absolutely heartbreaking, especially when it's 2 or 3 related victims, like father and sons. We had a friend almost die from this over the summer. His coworker dropped and our friend thought the coworker had hit his head, so the friend went into the hole after his coworker and blacked out after about 20 seconds of shaking him, trying to get him to wake up. Everything went black for him and he says his body turned to jello, and the next thing he knew, the paramedics were yelling at him from above the hole. He mustered up the countenance to climb up to the entrance, where 4 paramedics grabbed his 200-pound self and practically threw him out of the pit while they rescued his rookie coworker. Both men turned out fine. Our friend is a seasoned plumber and took it all in stride, except for the sliding into raw sewage part because his girlfriend had to bring him clean clothes to the ER, and she was freaking out until she could see he was okay, but the poor kid wasn't so sure about his career choice for the few weeks after that. I used to work in telecom, and we had a rigorous confined spaces protocol whenever anyone was entering an underground vault or anything. Had to check their credentials on file, even if we spoke to them yesterday for the same thing. Had to have separate contact info for them and their partner, who could not enter the space at the same time. Had to have the exact location, plan of work, estimated duration of work, everything they could possibly provide. And then we had to have direct contact with them every 15 minutes. Not their partner, but the person in the hole. That last one was the worst part for the workers. They frequently did not have reception down there, so they'd have to back out, call, and go back in every 15 minutes. Story 5. The entirety of the internet is held together by a very outdated and very vulnerable routing protocol. Also, everyday people imagine the internet as shiny, highly secured, modern high-tech data centers, as shown in movie productions and stock photos. The reality is 99% of the internet is actually a bunch of crappy 19-inch racks full of bare metal crap, outdated legacy code, a spaghetti parade of network cables, cooling fans, and underpaid admins. Here's a fun exercise for you. Think of the computer or device that you are reading this message on right now. Now think of all the software necessary to get this message to your eyeballs. Layers upon layers upon layers of APIs from the software that takes my mechanical motion of typing keys to displaying it on my computer, to when I hit save, to the packets that go through the internet, to a cloud provider routed internally on software networks, down to some orchestrated Docker container, which in turn is running on some VM and hypervisor, which is storing this post on some virtualized redundant disk array somewhere. Eventually you are hitting bare metal silicone processors and electrons zipping around, which themselves are controlled by software. The internet stands on a mountain of software written by millions of people. Some of that software has horrible bugs and exploits waiting to be found. You're welcome. And that's not even getting into the software side of things. Nearly every app or website that every person uses here has been slapped together at the lowest cost by non-technical product managers, pushing underqualified devs to go live with barely functional code as fast as humanly possible, some of whom are even embracing the philosophy of move fast and break things. In cybersecurity, people think everyone is doing modern best practices and hacking is hard. Nope, most companies are in a flat network. No backup situation, and their cybersecurity team is underpaid and understaffed. Most security practices in some places were because they either had an incident or their network engineers or system admin decided to play it safe instead of convenient when setting things up. When I was a consultant, the many times I was able to find security gaps big enough to fit a cruise ship, or the number of practices that were unsafe, accounts without password requirements, firewall rules without proper inbound-outbound rules, was scary. And worst is that unless they get breached and fined to hell and back, they will not fix the issue ever. Story 6. Do you know how you worry about getting your frozen and refrigerated groceries home and put away before they spoil? Overnight stalkers don't. Working in a kitchen, there's a reason many restaurants refuse deliveries between 12 and 1. If everyone is working, no one is available to accept the order, and put the perishables away. Sometimes frozen will not be so frozen by the time it gets into the freezer or walk-in. I was a frozen food stalker at a grocery store as a teenager. The amount of times some of the frozen crap sat thawing on U-boats was astonishing. My wife freaks out if frozen stuff goes a half an hour before it gets into our home freezer, if she only knew the truth. Oh, 100%. I used to work in retail, and even though the official guideline was 20 minutes out of the chiller or freezer, or 20 back in before being worked, every cage is out until it's worked. Slower workers or people getting distracted might leave a chilled cage out for 1 to 2 hours. I've seen frozen deliveries left in the warehouse overnight and just put in the back of the freezer and left until refrozen before being worked. Here in the UK at least, supermarkets are too short-staffed to do anything correctly. Corporate greed has slashed staffing, and now every corner that can be cut is cut, especially the health and safety stuff despite the legal requirements. Oof, so true. Corporate thinks they do though. Such a joke. They also think those refrigerated trucks stay refrigerated and the cold chain is maintained. I was a large grocery store floral manager. Okay, flowers, who cares about cold chains, right? But my stuff arrives on the same truck as the product. For a little while, corporations thought it would be a good idea to provide little sensors with the flowers that would flash red and show the highest temp the flowers were subjected to in transit. The idea being that the cold chain shouldn't be broken, and we should complain if it was. Never once did those flowers not flash red and show an absolutely unacceptable temp. I can't complain about all my flowers. I would have nothing left. I'm not concerned about the lack of a cold chain on my lilies, but the milk and veggies on the same truck are a concern. Also learned, check your invoices carefully. Do you think it's theft? Ha, the vendor shorts on products they charged you for are way more of a problem. I worked at a Sam's Club years ago and would see this. The overnight crew would come in just before 9 p.m., start pulling pallets of product off the floor of the giant walk-in freezers, and set them out in the open floor all night. They would work off pallets that were up in the racks inside the freezer, and even then they'd pull some of those out and set them on the floor. Pallets would sit out all night for their entire shift, most of the time until 5 a.m. Story 7. As a mechanic, I have to say that the colder and more distant a mechanic is, the more likely they are to be honest. It's the really friendly ones who are ripping you off while they're being chummy with you. I'm surprised you didn't mention the absurd stuff people are still driving on. Subframes hanging on by a thread, tires that you let the air out of before zipping the lugs off because one wrong move is a blowout, brakes without any pressure due to leaks. We're driving alongside these people and half of them don't even know there's a problem with their car, somehow. It's downright depressing and horrifying how bad some people's cars are and how oblivious they are to the fact that they are a human hair away from killing themselves or someone else. I'd have to disagree as a former technician. I always try to explain in layman's terms to people what's wrong, to maybe inflect how bad the issue may become or how important it may be to get handled. The only time I was a cold dick was to a customer who was the same, or a service writer or boss. Otherwise, I always treated customers like I would my grandma or kids if they were asking questions. Sometimes I'd have to stop myself from talking too much. I was always cordial and friendly. My experience has been very different. Super friendly mechanic, I bring him a coffee, he throws a couple of things in for free. His wife shares the tzatziki recipe, I hang out with their parrots, and my bill is always cheap. He also likes to tour me around the garage while my cats are on the lift, and show me what he's doing to my car, why I need to get it done, and if I can wait for a later visit to fix it. I get the final call on all the work. Mechanics is the only profession I've had that consistently gets angry with me for politely but firmly resisting their attempts to upsell me, despite being a pencil neck who knows nothing about cars. I even made a guy I didn't know was a mechanic angry enough to get asked to leave the bar we were both at, by complaining about an hour of labor being a joke and a ripoff when I was getting my car fixed. A lot of working class dudes really get their jimmies rustled getting told what's up by a guy they could easily beat up, even if what they're getting told is true and fair. I mean, that's what you think you're doing, and I'm not going to argue, but I've met a lot of people who downplay the amount of work as well as have completely out-of-touch ideas about what a job should cost. Not really fair when this type of haggling is not done to everyone. If you, by your own admission, don't know anything about cars, then you're not in a position to determine if you're being upsold or not, or if you're being scammed for labor costs. You're not just paying for their time, you're paying for all their years of experience and knowledge up to that point, which enables them to fix your car. But suddenly when it comes time to pay, suddenly everyone's an expert. If you know so much about the job, do it yourself. It's downright disrespectful to tell people what the value of their labor is, and it's honestly unfair when most of the costs are usually parts. Story 8. A lot of people don't realize it, but graduation success rate can basically be predicted based on their third grade reading ability. Early education is important, folks. Does it also encompass predicting the gifted to dropout pipeline? Serious question. I'm curious whether this includes spotting the hyperlexic kids and what happens to a lot of us, especially if they don't consider that the hyperlexic kids might be neurodivergent. I had teachers in school who warned me someone who was in all the honors/gifted stuff from hanging around so many kids who didn't live up to their potential. So many of them had started out like me, and somewhere along the way something collapsed. They started purposefully failing, and their parents and teachers just gave up on them. I did great in school, but started falling apart in my 20s. I felt like a failure, that I was letting down all the people that had told me I'd be someone great. I was diagnosed with autism when I was 40. When I reconnected with some of those high school friends who were burnt out, nearly all of them had been diagnosed with autism and/or ADHD as adults. We all wonder what would have happened if we'd been diagnosed at a younger age. Maybe they wouldn't have crashed and burned in school. Maybe I wouldn't have collapsed in my 20s from the stress of masking all those years. This is very true. My church has a volunteer program for people to spend 30 minutes a week reading with elementary students. Most schools in my city are poor, and those schools are predominantly made up of minorities and low-income families. We've seen an increase in high school graduates. Statistically, age-appropriate reading levels makes it much more likely for students to finish school and even stay out of jail as adults. Being behind in third grade, reading and math significantly lowers your chances of ever being caught up with those subjects, mostly because the focus shifts from mechanics to comprehension/application in fourth grade and beyond. Most students who can't read by third grade will always be functionally illiterate. The ones who can't do basic arithmetic will struggle with math forever. Yes, there are exceptions and intensive interventions that can be accessed for years and can fix it if someone is motivated, but those services are often prohibitively expensive, and many people get so defeated by always being behind in school that they lose the motivation needed for intervention to be successful. It's insane to think that so much of a person's fate can be determined at age 9, but research shows this to be true time and time again. Story 9. Probably how painful and long dying naturally can take. I work in memory care and have cared for so many people dying. It's not a nice conversation with a loved one and then peacefully drifting off to sleep like in the movies. Sometimes it can take days, up to 2 weeks once they transition, before they take their last breath. Sometimes they scream and writhe for days while unconscious until they pass. Morphine should be a human right. Assisted suicide should be a human right. My aunt was a nurse in hospice. She told us about how many people died in agony. What really scared me, though, was how many old people she talked about who were still terrified to die. Like they would be 90 plus and sobbing about how they weren't ready. In the movies, they always make it look like old people are at peace and ready to go. I've watched my grandmother's dementia slowly take her for over 5 years now. Watched a family member slowly die from liver cancer and a family member die from a rare little documented form of pancreatic cancer. People give me crap about dying riding my motorcycle, but I tell them that I've seen the alternative, and a motorcycle accident is a much better way to go out. I watched my husband die of cancer. He was in the active process of dying for over 5 days. I lay in his bed with him and held him nearly the entire time. It was horrific, and I will never again be the person I was before that. Quite frankly, I'm still in that hospital room from 7 years ago. I never really left. In my opinion, it's impossible to witness that and find any beauty in the life cycle, let alone have any faith in a higher power left. We are meat sacks. We are born, we die, we decay. That's all. Yeah, it's absolutely brutal. My significant other recently lost her grandma. She spent the last 10+ days of her life unable to speak, open her eyes, eat, drink, move, etc. She basically just laid in her bed in the facility she was at and slowly withered. It was brutal for my SO and her family. They all sat there for hours/days on end thinking she was going to pass, and she'd just keep hanging on. The hospice nurse would stop by each day and multiple times tell the family this was it, she's gonna pass today. Nope. My mother-in-law's mother was the same. She passed away a few days before New Year's Eve 10 years ago, in hospice for 4 months, bedridden for the last 4 weeks, stopped walking around shortly after Thanksgiving, stopped eating right before Christmas. They were trying to keep the insides of her mouth moistened with a Q-tip dipped in water because she wasn't drinking. Every day we'd assume it was the day, and then it wasn't. We finally got the call on the 28th that she had passed, and it was sad, but honestly, such a relief. I can't imagine her suffering. If that's what I have waiting for me at the end of my life, I'll see myself out. Story 10. The amount of worms in fish from the ocean is astonishing. I'll never forget the very awkward conversation I had as a chef with a guest in our dining room. She ordered our current fresh fish, but only cooked to about medium. I told the server we could only offer this fish well done. The guest was unhappy about that and asked to speak with me. I tried to beat around the bush a little at first, but finally just had to very bluntly but politely explain that this specific fish, munching aka sickle pomfret, is very prone to parasites and worms. They are very visible when we butcher the fish, and while perfectly safe and delicious fully cooked, is not a good option for sashimi or less than well done. She changed her order. I live in Japan, where of course most fish seem to carry anisakis worms. Usually, and technically regulated, raw fish is supposed to be frozen and then thawed before serving to kill the worms. And it's very effective because anisakis infestation in humans is not exactly common here. But one time, I was picking a friend up at a ferry and she wanted to grab lunch at the seashore. I had some deep-fried fish thing, but she chose the sashimi rice bowl, raw fish on rice. She offered me a taste and I took a bite to be polite. Within 2 hours, something was trying to tunnel out of my stomach, and the pain was so bad I couldn't breathe. Luckily, there's a traditional OTC stomach remedy sold in Japan that smells like creosote, and fishermen swear by it because it kills the worms almost instantly. I took that and was fine, but just one tiny bite of fresh raw fish that obviously had never been frozen, and I immediately got sick. Story 11. I work in a shelter. Some of our guests are from middle and upper class backgrounds. Bad choices, bad health, bad treatment, and bad luck can happen to all of us, sometimes very quickly. As far as I can tell, the only thing all homeless people have in common is trauma and loss. Worked in the field, and I agree with trauma and loss. I think they all went through a downward spiral too, where one thing went wrong and then that meant they were less prepared for the next thing that went wrong, and then people who used to be there aren't anymore, etc. Things just keep getting worse until there's nowhere else to go. Once it gets rolling, it's like watching a slow-moving train just rolling people over. Traumatizing, really. That's the only way out, too. It has to be a spiral upward, one thing building on another. No silver bullets. Too many people wrongfully judge homeless people and blame them for their lot in life. Sometimes, and quite often, it's just life, and you end up losing important things by circumstances, or a family member takes your money, or you end up being let go. Anything can happen, and in the blink of an eye, end up homeless. I'm ashamed of how I used to be, honestly. I'm an MSW and rose to the top very quickly. I always heard the "it can happen to you" thing, but privately thought I was excluded from that. Then a bunch of stuff happened and I was like, oh, they're right. It is happening to me. It happened to me. I have no home. It is absolutely insane how many resources I know of as a social worker and how I knew better, and yet still ended up in that position. Story 12. I used to work in child protection. The people most likely to harm your child or you are people you already know, most likely family members. You can bar the door against bad men lurking in dark alleys, but when you do, remember who you're locking in with you. I used to live with a lady who worked in child services. She was one of the toughest cookies around, but some nights she would get home, grab a bottle of wine, walk out to the back deck and just stare there until the wine was gone and she smoked a pack of cigarettes. I wouldn't even ask how work had been those days because you could tell she'd been wrecked by something. I couldn't do it. People are so freaking disgusting to children. I had a couple of friends, associates really, become convinced the world was out to steal their daughters and traffic them when that stupid Sound of Freedom movie came out. Suddenly, their constant worry and default thought was that their daughters were going to be trafficked. No matter how many times I told them that their fears of trafficking were wildly overblown and that the real danger was always a trusted neighbor, friend, brother, pastor, etc., they would never believe me. We've all been trained to see strangers as the boogeymen, when time and time again it's established that the boogeyman is always someone in our lives. While I was there was a non-zero number of families who sided with the abuser over the accuser. Even married parents would choose their spouse's denials over the documented evidence of their children. Not only do we prefer to believe that our abusers will be strangers, but we choose to willfully deny the truth of our relatives' wrongdoings and deny the suffering of their survivors for our own mental comfort.
Doctors, what is your most surprising, "I can't believe I need to have this conversation with an adult" story? I had severe asthma as a kid. I was intubated for a severe attack a few times. My parents were instructed to take better precautions in our home and went through instructions: more dusting, washing bed sheets, etc., and the big one, no smoking inside the house. So my parents agreed to all of this. A few weeks later, I'm back in the hospital. A doctor recognized me and came over to talk. Then he bent over and smelled my head. I'll never forget that. I thought it was so weird. He told a nurse to sit there and not let me leave with my parents. When my parents showed up, he asked point blank, "Did you not understand what I told you last time? Do you understand these attacks could be fatal? But we opened windows and have stopped smoking in her room when we put her to bed." And that's when they called Child Protective Services? Nope. If they did, nothing was done about it. This ranks surprisingly low in terms of bad parenting decisions on their part. I saw a patient for a follow-up after 3 ER visits in as many days for asthma. He was from another country, so this was the first time I ever met him. His lungs sound absolutely terrible, but he swears he is taking the inhaler about every 2 to 4 hours with no relief. This raises suspicion to me, as the same meds are working in the ER. I ask him to show me how he's using it. He holds it about a foot away from his mouth and does 2 puffs and swallows. I felt really bad. He had never received any education about his illness or medications. We had a diabetic patient who kept coming back with extremely high sugars. We asked him if he was following the regimen we taught him by testing his blood sugar, using the sliding scale, measuring the correct dose of insulin in the syringe, etc. He went through all the steps and it sounded like he was doing everything right. We asked him to demonstrate the steps he took so that we could observe and correct any mistakes that he may have been making. He did everything written until the very last step. He drew up the insulin in his syringe, pulled an orange out of his bag, injected the insulin into the orange, and then ate it. Turns out that when he was taught to practice how to give himself subcutaneous injections with oranges, he didn't realize he actually needed to inject himself for the insulin to do its job. Did you repost this from that "What's the stupidest thing a patient has ever done" thread from a while ago, or does this same guy just keep turning up in hospitals? I mention because it's my favorite stupid person story to quote at people. Got placed doing a rotation on the orthopedic floor of a big hospital in a rural area of Southern California. I was doing my rounds and saw a patient out of bed and walking around the floor following a knee replacement. She had a cane in her hand that she was carrying like a soldier would carry a rifle. I asked what she was doing and what she thought the cane was for. She replied she thought the cane was for pushing people out of her way since she's now handicapped, and it wasn't to help her walk on her post-op knee. This is the first response that genuinely made me laugh out loud. I can just imagine some cranky old woman swatting people out of her way. I have a cranky old woman story for you. My mom worked at a nursing home as a cook. They ended up having to take away the electric wheelchair of a resident that was 107 because she kept running people over when they made her mad. She was my mom's favorite resident. I was living in China and taught English on the side to a student whose mother was a physician. This was in 2012, just prior to the London Olympics. The mother wanted to send her daughter to London with a school group to watch the Olympics, but has reservations about it. I asked why. She said she was worried that her daughter would catch AIDS from using the public toilets. Yes, a doctor, probably of Chinese medicine. My friend is a student doctor and is on placement at a small-town doctor's office. She had a 70-ish-year-old woman come in with a complaint of a small but painless growth that was visible at the back of her throat. Turns out it took her 70 years to notice her uvula. That coming to the ER for a pregnancy test is a very, very expensive way to do it. Apparently, she didn't know that you could buy one at the Rite Aid down the block. Seriously, don't come to the ER for a pregnancy test, because the pregnancy test won't be the only surprise that you'll be getting. Also, if you have diabetes, you need to take your medication. No, getting fatter isn't the worst that can happen. The worst that can happen is that you'll die. That's why you're in the ER with diabetic ketoacidosis and suffering organ damage. It's why you're gonna lose your toes. Take your goddamn meds. This hits hard for me. I had an uncle who I was very close to who was very sick the entire time I knew him. I know he had very, very severe diabetes, but I don't remember what else he suffered from. I have those distinct memories of him taking me to McDonald's so that we could throw the fries to the seagulls, and hanging out in the parking lot, and he'd always have the heat on full blast because the circulation to his extremities was so poor. By the time he died, he lost both of his legs and 4 of his fingers. The irony was that he loved basketball so much. He used to chase me around with his leg nubs and race me down the street in his electric wheelchair. He was really amazing. He never let me be afraid of his amputations or his condition. I even used to give him insulin shots, even though needles scare the crap out of me as an adult. He was a remarkable human being. I miss him, and I wish that he could have known me as a real developed person. Unfortunately, I was 6 when he died. I hope he'd be proud. Not a doctor, but when I was in Afghanistan, a local man came up to us on patrol with his hand wrapped in a sheet. He was in visible pain and was asking for a doctor. So we got the medic to see him, and I helped unwrap his hand, and it was just huge. He had cut his hand very badly, and for whatever reason, he kept it submerged in diesel for 3 days before seeking help. His hand appeared to have soaked up a crapload of diesel, and it was just infected to heck, but it resembled a water balloon, and lightly touching it caused it to piss liquid. It was nasty. That the 30-plus cups of coffee he was drinking every day could possibly be the cause of his chief complaints, of anxiety and insomnia. He said he was not willing to give this up or try decaf. 30-plus, man, I'm such an amateur. Your heart thanks you for your amateur ways. I'm a paramedic and recently transported an idiot who self-presented to the local hospital who found he was having a heart attack, STEMI, and needed him sent to a bigger hospital for treatment. During my assessment, I asked him how long he'd been having chest pain. On and off for 12 months, he tells me. Any family history? One of the biggest indicators. Oh yes, Dad died of a heart attack. Brother died of a heart attack. Both of their first presentations stone dead on the spot. No about. So you have a 12-month history of intermittent chest pain and a family history of your closest male relatives spontaneously chucking Hardee's and dying, and you've never got it investigated? Furthermore, the only reason you came to the hospital tonight is that your family badgered you into it. I told him he needed a solid kick in the arse. To his credit, he agreed. So I'm only an EMT, but I want to weigh in here to this conversation. I had to tell a patient with severe pneumonia and the patient's family that you don't get sick, i.e. catch a cold, by leaving your skin exposed. The family was vehemently debating me on the fact, claiming that I had no idea what I was talking about because I'm not a doctor. Attempting to explain to them the necessity for a foreign body to enter your system was the most preposterous thing to them. My parents always told me that the reason I got sick was because I wore t-shirts to bed. Yes, mother, I got the flu because I exposed my forearms and hands as I slept, not because half of the kids at my school were probably off dying from it. Lady had a broken jaw. She comes in after 2 weeks with an open mandible fracture. Referred her to the hospital for immediate surgery. She never went because it doesn't bother her and she'll see if it gets better. This doesn't surprise me much, particularly if it's in the US. If it's not bothering her, I imagine concerns about the cost as well as any time out of work would be major deciding factors in that decision. Obviously though, not great to leave it untreated. How is this an acceptable way to live in a first world country? I'm not a doctor, but my mom doesn't have a good grasp on the reproductive system, so I had to be the one to explain that. Getting my tubes removed did not remove my ability to get a period. That we women have a urethra, a vag, and an anus. Babies do not come from the urethra. This one was strange because she had me and my sister, so. That when you neuter a dog, you just remove the balls, not the red rocket too. China and Taiwan's sex ed was severely lacking, so my mom, until she was in her 20s, believed that if you sat on a seat still warm on the bus that a guy sat in before you, you can get pregnant. If you kissed a guy, you could get pregnant. I'm still finding out years later misconceptions that my poor mother has about reproduction and explaining things to her. As a veterinarian, I had a 10-minute conversation with an owner explaining which side was the dog's left side. I worked at a vet clinic when I was in high school. One day, a vet came out of an exam room and asked me how to tell whether a puppy was a girl or a boy. Thinking it was a joke or a trick question, I said, "You flip them over and look, right?" The vet sighed and walked away. Apparently, this client, who fancied herself a breeder, multiple litters at this point, expensive breed, had asked dead seriously how you tell if a puppy is a boy or a girl. I had to explain to a client that just because his puppy had nipples did not mean it was a girl. So, not a doctor, but I work at the hospital. We had someone come into A&E because they needed their nails redoing. They genuinely thought it was a good idea to go to accident and emergency to have their fake nails taken off and redone because they had gotten too long and become uncomfortable. Talk about being high maintenance. Had a patient in our high priority area for DKA, sugar was in the 800s, stomach pain, nausea, vomiting, and the such. Pulled Burger King and gummy worms out of his backpack and then proceeded to eat them. Like, bro, do you even know what diabetes is? Non-compliance and lack of medical knowledge is a big thing in Detroit. CNA here. I did a patient's glucose the other day and it came back in the 500s. They were complaining of stomach pain and nausea, just really miserable. I reported the number to the nurse, and while we waited for insulin, the patient asked me to bring them ice cream. Why? Their reaction was very clear once I told them what their blood sugar was, that they knew it was bad. Heck, they started crying, but then immediately asked for ice cream, because that'll totally solve the problem. I mean, I'm a biggish girl, and I'm no stranger to emotional eating, but when your blood sugar comes back so high that the nurse has to drop everything to come to treat you, it's probably no bueno to reach for the sugar. The nurse and I were able to convince them to throw away the pile of crap they had on their table, soda, candy, piece of pie, etc., and that sugar-free applesauce was an improvement over eating ice cream. But man, the next day they were right back to order pizza delivered to the facility, and were not checking a single fruit or vegetable on their menu. My job is to support the patient, but damn, is it hard sometimes. I can only positively encourage them to select healthy options so many times. If they don't want to eat their vegetables, I can't force them to. Are you allowed to tell people that they will die within the next 5 years if they don't change? My mother helps the Amish get dental care. One Amish woman complained that she needed new dentures. When asked why she thought so, she replied, "Well, I've lost weight, and you know that when you lose weight, you lose it in your gums first." Doctors and dentists, if you're looking for a community to serve, the Amish can truly use your help. I could write a book about the things I've seen. We're waiting on that book of yours. Obligatory, not me, but my wife. She's a nurse practitioner and had to explain to a 40-year-old man that brown sugar did in fact contain sugar, and that is most likely the reason why he now has diabetes. The same man also adamantly insisted his wine consumption was not an issue because he only drank the dry stuff like Chianti, so it doesn't have any sugar. When my FIL was diagnosed with prostate cancer, he decided to deal with it by going vegan instead of getting actual treatment. He also cut out all sugar, going as far as refusing to eat corn because of the high sugar content, as cancer feeds off sugar. The kicker was that he was a raging alcoholic and would drink 2 to 3 1.5-liter bottles of white wine a day, refused to believe that white wine was full of sugar because it doesn't taste sweet. A conversation I recently had with my oncologist. Is it true that cancer cells feed on sugar? All cells feed on sugar. But is it going to affect my relapse chance? Oh goodness, no. A normal amount of sugar or fat in your diet isn't going to give any residual cancer cells the boost that they need to reestablish, nor is any tumor going to grow or not grow from lack of sugar. My mom tells it so much better, but here's a try. My mom was the head nurse at a clinic here in Houston in the 80s. She worked for an old World War II doctor that had gone into private practice, old school GP, when he returned back to the States. Well, one afternoon, she told me that they had a patient come in that was running a high fever and was complaining of pain in her pelvic area. Mom also tells me that there was a stench coming from the woman's lap that can only be described as enough to gag a maggot off a meat wagon. She begins to interview the patient, who told her that she and her boyfriend had been sexually active and that she has been in pain since. She thought that the woman may have contracted an STD and asked her to undress and wait for the doctor to examine her. The doctor arrives and closes the door, only to reopen it a few seconds later, mentioning about the need for fresh air. The doctor noticed that there was vaginal discharge and began to question the patient about her sex life. Was it protected, non-protected, etc.? According to Mom, the patient told her, "No doc, we always use a rubber." The doctor looked down and then noticed that there was a small rubber band extending from the woman's vag. The doctor reached in with his gloved hand and pulled it out. What came next can only be described as a magician pulling the magic cloth out of someone's mouth. One rubber band after another came out over the course of the next 10 minutes. Finally, once they were all removed, the doctor had the talk with the woman about sex education, and that rubber bands were not a successful contraceptive, and not what they meant by wearing a rubber, and then wrote her a prescription for ABX. TLDR, Mom was a nurse who had a patient use rubber bands as a contraceptive device who ended up with a severe infection that required medical attention to get them removed. To be 100% serious, this is why proper sex education is so critically important. Dentist here. Things I've had to explain to parents. 1. Breast milk can cause cavities. 2. Don't put your kids to bed with a bottle of Coke in it. They then switched to Diet Coke. Facepalm. 3. Don't wiggle out your permanent teeth just because the tooth fairy will give you money. 4. You can't brush cavities away with toothpaste, or any of these new internet fads. Oil pulling, honey, chocolate. Once your cavity is deep enough, it needs to be fixed by a dentist. 5. Fluoride isn't poison any more than table salt is poison. Small quantities are good for you. Anyone who tells you otherwise has been lied to and believed it. I have plenty more, but I'd have to think harder. I had apple juice bottles as a baby. I had cavities. My younger siblings didn't have apple juice bottles as babies. They didn't get cavities. Proof my parents are capable of learning. That taking that weird plant they bought from a pharmacy online isn't 14.324 times better than chemo and doesn't only attack cancer cells because it likes the acid environment in it. This type of snake oil pisses me off. How did they respond? With so many fallacious, stupid arguments. Like, yes, but they drink that in a small remote village in the Amazonian forest, and they don't have any cases of lung cancer. Maybe it's because they don't smoke and don't have CT scans or biopsies. My sister is a doctor, and 25 years ago, when she had her very first patient out of residency, and this patient refused to allow her to see her breasts, which were sore and needed a mammogram to check out a lump. So sister asks why, and this girl, who was about 30 and single, said matter-of-factly, "Oh, that's lesbian. We can't do that. It's against the Lord's wishes." She loves telling this story at the dinner table at family gatherings, especially to our religious side. Then why didn't she ask for a male doctor? Oh, right, because that's sinful too. I guess God just wants you to have breast cancer. The way I imagined it really went down is that the woman didn't know why my sister had to physically check the lump. She just thought, I'm gonna get a mammogram, and no need to get all feely. This was in rural Pennsylvania. Not a doctor, but I regularly have people come in for eye examinations because when I take off my glasses, things are blurry. Often these aren't passing comments during the exam, but the main reason for their visit to the clinic. Why do they think they wear glasses? Paramedic here. Was driving with my partner and a patient in the back. The patient was fine. The patient's skeezy boyfriend was riding in the front with me and apparently saw a golden opportunity to ask a question that had obviously been on his mind for some time. Him. So, when cats and dogs eat grass, that means they have cancer, right? Me? No. No, it does not. Made for an awkwardly silent ride the rest of the way. What? And really, why did he even assume a paramedic would know whether or not animals have cancer? Had to explain to an adult, you have to brush all the sides of your teeth. Like, no, just the side that shows when you smile is not enough. And yes, flossing is not just a thing for rich people. Flossing is for people rich on time, or for people with a dentist appointment later that week. My dad told me about an extremely religious male patient who was concerned about his nocturnal emissions. He saw it as an offense to God and wanted to know what he could do to stop it. My dad's response? Well, it's gotta go somewhere, guy. Better out than in, I always say. Christ, the number of times I have to explain colds to adults. You're 40 years old and you've probably had 100 of these. How have you not figured this out yet? Do you come to the doctor every time? Antibiotics won't help. Drink fluids, Sudafed, and write this crap down for next time. Also, I need a doctor's note for missing work. Yes, I'm an adult. I know it's ridiculous. Exactly this. It's naive to think that people are so stupid they go to the doctor for a cold, but the truth is it's just bureaucracy making you go. If you're too ill to work due to the virus, you still have to go to the doctor to prove you're ill. While on dermatological rotation, a Middle Eastern patient saw me with what she described as some funny itching growth in her butt crack. Some quick investigation revealed it to be a severe case of genital warts. I explained the diagnosis and that it was an STD until she shockingly assured me that she was still a virgin. Now, virginity is a big issue for young Muslim women, or perhaps their families even more, but apparently that doesn't cover anal sex, and therefore no birth control in the form of, say, condoms was needed. I was working in GP and had a patient scheduled for an appointment. Looked through his notes to gain an idea of why he may be seeing me and saw he'd been seen a few times with knee pains/shoulder pains, and the like. The guy's in his 70s, so probably just arthritis. I'm thinking I'll do an examination of his sore joints and ask a few questions, prescribe some painkillers, and it'll be a quick one. Call him in, and he walks in and sits down and is cheery as anything. What seems to be the problem then, sir? I notice you've had some issues recently with sore joints, I ask. He then proceeds to tell me about his sore knee. So I check his knee and take a history, and it all seems fine. Ask anything else, and he's like, oh, actually, my neck is sore too. So I check his neck, and nothing untoward is to be found there either. At this point, he's like, okay, well, thanks, doc, I'll be off then. I say to him, oh, good, glad we could help. And you have no other pains at all before you go? He then sits back down and tells me he's been having central crushing chest pain radiating down his left arm and into his jaw since last night, and has been feeling breathless, and when it happened, he had an impending sense of doom. I know a lot of you won't be doctors here, but I'm sure you all recognize signs of an MI there. He had all the classic textbook symptoms. Called an ambulance, and he was rushed to the hospital for PCI. A friend nurse told me that an old man was prescribed suppositories for something he had. A couple of days later, he came back feeling worse and said the tablets were not doing anything. Yep, he was eating them. He had to be explained that suppositories are PR. Roommate was talking about how she often had unprotected sex in non-monogamous situations because condoms irritated her vag for days afterwards. I had to explain the concept of a latex allergy and the alternative Jimmy hats to a woman who had been sexually active for 12 years. What is something you're sick of seeing people romanticize? Victorian England. They weren't clean, they weren't prudes, and they weren't beautiful. Their pretty dresses that everyone loved so much were filled with toxic dyes. The men's cool hats contained toxic amounts of mercury, wallpaper often contained cyanide, cosmetics contained lead. They had children work, often to death. Sometimes they sent children into mines, naked because they were the only ones small enough to fit through some of the shafts, and they didn't want their clothes to get caught on anything. Most of the hallmark Victorian products and technologies were insanely flammable, poisonous, incredibly dangerous, or completely unsanitary. And literally everywhere you stepped in the city, you were stepping in deep puddles of animal excrement. Drives me nuts when people romanticize the Victorian era. I know all that, and I certainly wouldn't want to live there. However, I still think a lot of stuff from that period is super cool looking. Is that not okay in your mind? The Notebook. She leaves a great guy for no reason for an old flame. What a flake. That movie annoys me. They fought all the damn time. How is that romantic? Precisely. They're just crazy teens. She left a really lovely dude for some guy she argued with all the time? Jealousy, as if it proves your love. It's a cancer to your relationship is what it is. It's not hot or cute or funny or endearing. I had an adult boyfriend that told me I couldn't go to any parties alone if the ratio of men to women was too high. So romantic. Joker and Harley's abusive relationship. I'm tired of people romanticizing abusive relationships in the media in general as being experiences to emulate. Harley and Joker are definitely up there, but there are lots of examples in media that people don't even see as abusive. Twilight is another example that's always given. But then, there are relationships that are abusive and seen as romantic, like any sort of serious relationship that Wes Anderson has ever set up in a movie. Had a friend who read 50 Shades of Grey. She told me it's basically a classic abusive relationship guide. Can anyone confirm? Romeo and Juliet. You can tell who read or discussed the damn play. It does not paint a picture of a healthy relationship. They got married and spent the rest of their lives together. What more can you ask for? Mercutio. Pirates. But who knows, 300 years from now, we might have a Speak Like a Terrorist Day, and a Terrorists of the Mideast ride at Disney. On a related note, Vikings. I've followed Viking culture for quite some time now, and really got into Asatru in my late teens. It's been interesting to see the romanticizing grow exponentially because of the Vikings TV show, which I still have yet to watch. Maybe it's accurate, and I'm just being a snob. On the bright side, it made finding gear a lot easier for me. Game development. I don't care that you'd pay to work at Nintendo. We get treated and paid like garbage because there are literally hordes of people willing to be paid and treated even worse just to work on a certain game. Not to mention hundreds of thousands of obnoxious fans ready to crap all over your work if it isn't up to their standards. I'd never even considered that. It's an eye-opener. Autistic traits. Not being skilled at the nuances of social interaction sucks. I don't understand how most people can learn a skill and automatically apply it to nearly every context right off the bat. Just because I can do a particular thing in one specific context doesn't mean I can do it in nearly every context. What if the way I do it then turns out to be wrong? It's led to lots of miscommunication and embarrassing moments that have hampered relationship growth. What's so super about being socially awkward? OMG, so many teenage brittles at my high school do this. Oops, I just stumbled on my own feet. I'm so autistic. I hate going out partying. I'm so bad at being social. I hate parties. Proceeds to go to a party every night of that week. Mental illness. Yep, came here to say depression. It's not some dark, brooding choice that you make or that gets lifted when you find the right person, job, hobby, or shampoo. It's a disease that sucks the life from you and everyone that loves you. Being socially awkward. I see it all the time here at my university. People who go out and party every day and never eat alone. People who flirt and are successful in pursuing meaningful relationships. They post pics of themselves using Snapchat filters with taglines like, "Why am I so awkward?" It makes me so mad because I am socially awkward, and I know people who have crippling anxiety and depression because they can't figure out how to interact with people. Yet movies, TV, and books always paint these people as quirky individuals who are just better than everyone else. OMG, I tripped over something in public once. I'm so awkward, teehee. I just call myself clumsy. I tend to trip over everything, but since I have years of experience tripping, I know how to play it cool. The past. Yeah, everyone who's like, I totally wish I was born 200 years ago, so you could die of cholera and be forced to marry a guy 20 years older than you at 16. And then when he's finished with your cholera-infested corpse, your family has to dig a hole and bury you using cast iron shovels. War. It's really not fun at all. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Anti-intellectualism in the US. I understand the charm of rural America and see the virtue of hard and honest work, but I have a difficult time accepting the open hostility that is increasingly directed towards culture, education, and science in this country. I live in backwards Louisiana, The only people in my class who aren't stupid hillbillies are myself and a girl from New Jersey. I quit my day job, moved to a third world country, giving surfing lessons and teaching English. It's the best move I've done in my life, thing that pops up in Elite Daily or BuzzFeed. Yeah, it's great, but it applies only to a very few individuals, and very few end up successful, and most end up in debt or broke. Also, what about those folks in the third world countries like me? Where do we go to? Fifth world countries? You work hard and end up in a first world country, give it all up, and move back. Duh. Moving's only easy if it's down. Farming. I wish people understood that my entire livelihood depends on the weather. That one rainstorm can mean there goes 20K. I wish people understood that it's not awesome to get up at 3 a.m. to shove your entire arm up a cow's vag so that you can grab the legs of a calf and spend the next 2 hours pulling it out. I wish people knew that when the mad cow disease scare happened, my cows lost 95% of their value overnight, and prices took the next decade to return to their pre-scare values. I wish people would look at our acres of land and see hard work passed down from generation to generation instead of calling us greedy when we try to sell. I wish I could talk to people about how hard it is, but also how rewarding it can be. I wouldn't give it up for anything, but I wish people would stop thinking it was easy. A small-time farmer here has a 200-acre beef farm. Used to support my great-grandfather in the 30s and on, but now it's more like a hobby for me. Farms got too big and guys my size can't make $1 anymore. To be honest, last fall I butchered my last steer and I'm considering not getting any more to raise and just selling the hay. Used to buy feeders and raise them, rather than having a big herd. On point, it kills me when people act country when they have no clue what it entails. I know a few people that claim to be farmers, but in reality, have under 5 acres and just keep a few horses and maybe some pet goats. Otherwise, it's just people that have no clue what they're talking about and just doing what they think is country to be cool. Meanwhile, I dress normal. At work, you'd never know I'm a farmer unless I told you. My truck is a little different than most in the parking lot. That's about the only difference. Regular cab, long bed, 3/4 ton gas Chevy with no stacks. All the city boys blast country music, and I have every hard rock station preset in the tractor cab. New country is just glorified pop music anyways. The wife thought it was cool when we first got together that I had pet cows. Then one got out while she was home alone, and I was at work. It was funny talking her through getting the cow in. Took about half hour. It was trying to get her, while really standing there wondering what it was supposed to do. Finally, I asked her if she opened the gate. I couldn't figure out why it wouldn't go in. Nope, she didn't know she was supposed to. No clue how the cow was supposed to get back in. Now she's a cowgirl and told everyone that she collected the cow. I'll give her that, she did it all by herself. I wish people knew that having land doesn't make me rich. I'm as broke as the next guy, except my property taxes are higher and my repair bills are bigger. I've heard people before say you have a farm, you have plenty of money. Wish I knew where it was. I swear to God, if I hear shake that booty, jump into my lifted up pickup, or painted on jeans, one more frickin' time, I'm done with it all. Not caring about your own personal behavior and how it affects others as means of showing independence or strength. A certain Marilyn Monroe quote that she very likely never even said about handling someone at their worst comes to mind. There is some value in not giving a damn, but it's context dependent, and there are a lot of circumstances in your life in which being accountable or giving a damn about how you affect others is kind of important. That quote is almost always repeated by people who are utter assholes at all times. You have no best. Being an asshole specialist in anything. I'd much rather everyone want to be kind and enthusiastic than look up to a stoic douche. I'm so tired of the smart asshole character. He's an arrogant, selfish peen, but it's okay because he's clever. Example, Dr. House. And Rick Sanchez. We may love him, but he's an unrepentant peen. The past. Phrases like simpler time or more innocent time piss me off. The world is full of problems. The world has always been full of problems. Someone once used the words simple and pure to describe the world of the movie Casablanca. Yes, I'm sure that's exactly what Rick, Ilse, and Victor thought. They often throw that out talking about the 50s and early 60s. My image of that was completely shattered while talking with a coworker once who was a teenager around that time. He was telling me a story about something mostly unrelated and casually mentioned running a train on a girl. Basically yada yada'd over. I had to stop him and inquire, I'll never forget the way he asked me, "You've never run a train on a girl?" I recognized the look. It's the same look I give someone over 25 when they say they've never seen Star Wars. He went on to tell me that every weekend all the youths would hang out at the river and eventually one of them would take a girl just over behind a truck and get to business. Then it was customary that all of his other friends would take a turn as well. Consent was implied but never expressly stated in his tale. He talked about it like it was just another thing that you did. Blew my mind. Smoking. What's harder than slowly burning your lungs? Almost anything else. Agreed. It's very difficult for me to hang out with a smoker. I cannot stand the smell. It gets on everything, and the nasty teeth and all the health problems that go with it. Ugh, my teeth are already horribly sensitive and cavity prone from a long soda drinking habit I finally kicked. No thanks. Live with 2 smokers. Went on a trip last year and was gone for a week. Nobody around me smoked. I could smell it on my clean clothes because my luggage absorbed the smell. It was like a slap to the face when I walked in through the front door. I went on a cleaning frenzy and have been burning candles almost non-stop since. Stalking. It's not cute. Who romanticizes stalking? I came here to say this too. Too many TV shows and movies portray seriously disturbing, hostile behavior as cute proof that a guy just really likes her. No, dude, she said no like 8 times. Do not get on a plane to Paris and follow her around for a week. That's insane. So many guys think that if they're persistent enough, you'll come around because that's what they've been taught. Paris. The streets are dirtier and the people uglier than you would expect. Everything is ridiculously overpriced, and it's an annoyingly hard city to get around. Same goes for a lot of cities, but Paris and New York stand out as the 2 worst. If you're planning a vacation, check out Prague instead. Paris also has huge problems with racial tensions, segregation, Islamic extremism, and general social deprivation. It's honestly a dump, and there's not that much for tourists to see. London is a better tourist city by a long way. Respectful discourse. I'm an American for context. I had great experiences in both London and Paris. I found that Londoners are a lot like New Yorkers. They are excited to tell you all about their city. They want you to see the best of it, but like New Yorkers, I found I preferred them in small groups. Parisians had a charm that isn't unlike some of the southern states. I wonder sometimes if the epicenter of southern hospitality is New Orleans, and if so, that tradition may have roots in Paris. Many Parisians stopped and asked if my folks and I needed help finding anything when they saw our map. Restaurant managers and owners would sit at our table and find out what we like to eat before making a suggestion. While the best Londoners were excited to share their city with us, the best Parisians seemed interested in how we were doing. It's a subtle but important difference. I also found that I had to face more choices in Paris. In London, I felt like I got my fill of important sights. I left Paris needing to go back again. I left London feeling like I'd seen it, and now I want to see more of England. I enjoyed both cities, but if you funded me and gave me 3 days, it's Paris all the way. Having kids. We wouldn't have teenage and young adult women getting pregnant without regard to the stability of their relationships or lives if being a mom wasn't so romanticized. People treat a woman becoming a mother as such a validation of them as a person when it's nothing a stray dog in an alley can't do. We've largely gotten beyond the idea that getting a woman pregnant makes you a man. It's time we stopped seeing childbearing as proof as someone is a woman. With that, the fricked up sect of feminism that romanticizes being a single mother. Having 2 parents in a healthy relationship will always be better for the children than a single one. OMG, she was sick and he stayed right by her side. I was very disappointed when I woke up from my spinal cord surgery with the left half of my body from my shoulder down, numb as hell, to find my husband was cheating with my own sister. I've been regaining sensation and function, and I've learned to walk again, and I can take care of myself. But I really wish them both the absolute worst. I haven't spoken to either of them since I found out. That blows chunks. What absolute frickers. May they both take turns on Satan's barbed cock. They'd probably enjoy it. I just stay in my little bubble with the rest of my family, who all have cut them off as well, and take life one day at a time. I've crawled my way out of hell inch by inch with a smile on my face, and neither of them will ever be anywhere near my frickin' level. I've already won. In TV shows, stalking people even if they reject you until they love you. Codependent relationships. Oh god, this right here. My ex-BFF is in a romantic one right now, and it's been horrifying to witness. They don't do anything without the other. Said I love yous within a month of meeting. He fell in love the same day, moved in together 3 weeks after meeting, dropped all of his friends and all of his hobbies. I admit I'm bitter because he dropped me as well, but holy crap, I had no idea how someone could change that much overnight. It's just not healthy. Our culture makes it seem like it's a good thing. It isn't. One day they'll hopefully realize it. I was in a codependent relationship with a bipolar girl once. It was a nightmare to end it. Fighting for your freedom. Quit playing. You fought maybe for the guys to your left and right. You fought maybe for the freedom of some Iraqis. You fought maybe for free college. There are very few people currently living who can argue that they fought for the freedom of other Americans. I'm a veteran. I am sick of hearing it used as an end-all to every argument. Here come the downvotes. Seriously, as a veteran has surpassed as a parent as my new hatred intro to an opinion. My buddy guarded a gate in the US for 4 years in his hometown and got a free college education, plus a cushy government job off of veteran points. Yet he still manages to have PTSD when wasted. Apocalypse or dystopia scenarios. It wouldn't be fun or freeing to kill zombies or rebel against a corrupt government or fight demons. It would be horrific, scarring, and end in death of you and everyone you love. The first thing about those scenarios that scares me is hunger. When was the last time you remember being hungry and unable to fix it? If it gets bad enough, in a lot of places you can go somewhere to ask or beg for food, or just find some if your standards are low enough. But in one of those dark futures, your life is less a montage of rebelling and fighting, and more of blank spaces between finding food so you don't die of hunger or get killed because you were too weak to fight back. Europe. People think it's this magical place with white, blue-eyed people living in castles, perfect socialism, lots of drink and magic and crap. Do you know what they call a quarter pounder there? Nationalism. It's one of the biggest system flaws in the entire human brain. Creates in-group, out-group, us versus them tribal warfare kinds of mentalities. And yet some people think that if you don't feel strongly nationalistic, then you are less deserving of rights and citizenship, which is of course a nationalistic view in itself. Screw nationalism. I agree. I think that there is nothing wrong with liking your homeland and feeling united with your people, but sometimes people take it too far. They use it as a justification for war, or they start to think of themselves as superior. Different countries and cultures are beautiful things, but at the end of the day, it's just a piece of land on the earth that you happen to be born on. All of us are human, and in my opinion, it's sad that some people feel so divided by nationality. Old houses. Mine was built in 1919, and it's been so cold this weekend because of our original windows. Houses don't have character. Just get some wide baseboards for a new house where you don't have to worry about cast iron pipe and knobs and tubes. Agreed. Ours was built in 1867, and the damn thing constantly needs repairs, not to mention the pain of the propane furnace going out in the middle of a Canadian winter. My advice, invest in new windows. We saved a considerable amount on heating after replacing our century-old plus windows, and we also haven't nearly frozen to death since. Bacon. Bacon this, bacon that. It isn't nearly as tasty as people say it is, and I love eating bacon from time to time. Even the word itself is starting to make me cringe. Poverty. People from comfortable situations dream about living the simple, carefree life in a hovel with no water or electricity. If you've been or grown up in a third world country, you know that crap is not funny at all. Being poor sucks. Once I was going through a really rough time financially. I was in government assistance working and going to food banks because ends just weren't meeting due to some medical issues. I was in college non-traditionally, but only by the strictest definition. I was in my early 20s, but I was dual majoring, and in a part of my second degree study, that meant I'd been in college for about 6 years. In tense programs, I decided to do the dual thing more linear, and I was in class with 17 to 18-year-olds again. It was a lib arts program too, so super quirky art kids, TM, and I had this kid, like 18-year-old guy that had been super cool thus far, invite me over to work on a project. I get to the address he gave me. It's a nice-ass gated community. I get up into this 2-bed furnished apartment with a loft just for him, paid for by his parents, he tells me, and I'm, meanwhile, living across town in a studio that has plumbing problems and rats in the parking lot. I told him how beautiful the place was, and he went on this vent, showing me all these little super minor cosmetic issues with the finishing of the apartment, like a gap in the corner of the crown mounding, and talking about how all this new construction always has problems. Before we were done doing what we needed to do, he then told me about his 5-year plan to backpack through Laos and Thailand and Vietnam, and to spend time with the Buddhist monks and get in tune with the universe. I went home and ate generic food bank macaroni and cheese out of a box. Happiness. So many people seem to view happiness as some far-off, impossible goal, and they don't see what they have in front of them. Life will never be perfect, but you can always keep pushing in the right direction and keep people around who love and support you. As long as you're doing that, why not just be happy with the way things are in the meantime? Mental illness. This crap sucks. It isn't quirky or cute. While not a mainstream thing, I really never got the fascination with serial killers or school shooters. There is nothing overly interesting about people with such poor coping skills that they feel the need to harm other people for no real reason. Most of the time, they're just big babies or people so desperate for attention they had to do that to be remembered. The worst was all that crap post-Columbine. It wasn't their fault, it was society's. A fairly decent portion of the population acted like they were martyrs for the bullied instead of sociopathic losers with bad haircuts. Manufacturing jobs in the US and how they were true middle-class jobs. Guess why those workers made a middle-class income? Unions. Now the jobs that most Americans work, service, retail, home healthcare, security, etc., often don't pay enough for someone to have only one job and also don't usually have the best benefits. Some of these jobs have a union, but in the last couple of decades, as these jobs have increased and manufacturing jobs have decreased, those unions have been gutted of their power. The result? A rapidly dwindling middle class. All politicians do is go, "Hey, wasn't it great when you made money? I'll help bring back those good old days." Those jobs are never coming back. They have been replaced by automation. We should be focusing our energy on getting these workers retrained or finding other skills, but no. Let's just dream together while nothing gets fixed. Both a college degree and the potential to be successful without a college degree. Stop trying to validate your own decisions like that. If you really made a great choice, well then talk less and do more good. Stories of the token one-offs and acts of kindness. You see them on Reddit all the time. The dying kid who gets to be Superman for the day, the homeless guy who got given dinner for free by the restaurant, etc. It's like if we do something nice for this one guy, then everything is fine. And we can bury our heads in the sand and ignore real problems like poverty and healthcare. Higher taxes? I bought an ex-serviceman a coffee once. That there is some sort of nobility to being ignorant or being a criminal. Too much of popular culture is wrapped up in being a simple country boy, thug life, or whatever other genre you want to pick. There is a difference between taking pride in your history and culture and reveling or glorifying its negative aspects to justify an unwillingness to learn from and move past it. You didn't make it past high school? Had a crap life? Who cares? Why don't you take pride in doing better and moving forward? I'm surprised I haven't seen this comment yet, but being a crazy girlfriend or boyfriend. It's not cute, it's controlling and possessive behavior, and that is not a sign of a healthy relationship. Touring. I remember watching a documentary about thrash metal in the style of Slayer and Metallica, and hearing the really sad stories about life on the road. Some of those band members had to get a job for 2 weeks, then quit that job and work for someone else for 2 weeks to align with tour dates. Stories of bands having to live in their cars for the duration of almost a year-long tour. When they got back, many of their relationships had been broken, and sometimes terrible accidents, EX Cliff Burton's death, happened on the road. From what I saw in that documentary, touring is pure hell. Totally ended this vision of touring in big tour buses in 5-star hotels and crap. Snape and his secret love for Lily Potter. He severs their relationship by calling her a mudblood during their years at Hogwarts, and when she dies, he mistreats her son for 7 years and blames him for her death. He basically immortalized his childhood crush by protecting and abusing her son. He did heroic things, but he's no romantic, and his and Lily's love story is a cruel joke whose flaws always seem to be overlooked. Exactly! Seriously, dude took his frustration over past mistakes he made out on innocent children. Sweden. It's nice and all with getting taxes worth, but it's cold as heck most of the time, and so are most people. Some people on Reddit seem to think it's some form of glory hole of happiness with squirting perfect blondes, aurora rainbows, and all-you-can-eat M&Ms. I've lived here my entire life and it's pretty freaking amazing. I really can't complain. It's not perfect, but it's a damn good country. What is the single most liberating thought that you've ever had? That everyone's too busy thinking about themselves to remember that one time I embarrassed myself by saying the wrong thing. I can't count the number of times I've woken up with a hangover thinking, I can't believe I said that. Everyone must think I'm an idiot. I'm not sure I ever woke up thinking, I can't believe my friend said that. What an idiot. Maybe you're just the only idiot in your friend group. I can do anything I want as long as I accept the consequences. Radical freedom intensifies. If new evidence presents itself, it's okay to change my beliefs about something. Even if those beliefs felt like a part of who I was before, it's okay to change my mind. In fact, that's a huge sign of intelligence and maturity to be able to gain new information and process it, then form an opinion that may be different than the one that you had before. That's why I take flip-flopping in politics with a grain of salt. If we never change our minds based on new facts and realizations, we'd still be living by the code of Hammurabi. There's a difference, though, between changing your mind when presented with new evidence and pandering to the current audience. The latter is generally what people mean when they say politicians are flip-flopping. That life is unfair and it's a good thing because it means you don't deserve all the bad things that happen to you. I love this. The rain falls upon the just and the unjust. It's a saying as old as Jesus, at least. Probably much older. I get to choose who's in my life and who isn't. This one took me over 30 years to realize. Life-changing. I learned this when I was still a teen. It's very frustrating to hear people regularly complain about people that they choose to communicate with and spend time with. That I'd probably miss being in a relationship more than the person I was with. Felt so free when I broke it off. They broke up with me, but it's something that I would never undo because I wasn't happy. I was just used to that relationship. That whatever is worrying me at this moment won't be an issue in a few years, most likely. 2 rules to live by. 1, don't sweat the small stuff, and 2, it's all small stuff. Also, 1, don't sweat the petty things, and 2, don't pet the sweaty things. That every person that you pass on the street has a story, a reason for why they dress, how they act, and they have motivations and beliefs just like you. It's an obvious point, but it has helped me be emphatic and compassionate. Someone else posted this a little while ago on an Ask Reddit thread for famous quotes. A prison becomes a home when you have the key. George Sterling. When asked why he carried a cyanide pill around with him. Note to self, never ask George Sterling for an aspirin. He's been dead for 90 years. You'll be fine unless you encounter his corpse. I can say no to my parents. I'm still working on this one. Just tell them you have a headache. That I am not, nor will I ever be conventionally beautiful. It sounds like an obvious thing, but once I actually acknowledged it, it was really freeing. I can't do much about my looks, so I just stopped sweating it and being jealous or whatever. I'm much happier now. Most important realization of your life, and the looks are never the issue. It's the vanity that's the issue. I hate to say this, but looks are definitely an issue. Being attractive will help you no matter what you do. People assume you're smarter or more trustworthy if you're attractive, not to mention all the well-known perks. That my friends do in fact like me and aren't annoyed that I'm around, or we just wouldn't be friends. I used to think this, but a group of friends I'm kinda into has this one guy who is a total parasite. When asked why they hang out with him, they say we pity him. He hangs out with us, honestly, and it makes me insecure. As long as they actively try to hang out with you, the friendship is mutual. If you're unsure, just don't talk to them for a while and see if they reach out. After 2 weeks of living by myself for the first time, oh my god, I don't actually have to wear pants here. I lived alone for 7 years, and then let someone down on their luck move in. Getting used to peeing with the door closed again was weird. Oh man, that's another great thing about living alone. I have to remind myself to close the door when I have company over. If I ever want to just leave and start a new life, I could do it. Yes, I did this. I also found out there are a few folks who genuinely miss me and really look forward to when I visit. Unintentional ego boost and quite heartwarming. Never make someone a priority in your life, if you're just an option in theirs. Yes, I was in a 3-year relationship where I made that person my everything, and I was just a side thought for them. It's been a year since we broke up, and there are still aftershocks from putting myself through that hell. I just started to date again, and I'm very scared that this will happen again. Hey, I just wanted to say that I was in the exact same situation, but it was an 8-year relationship, and it gets better. Breaking up was the most important step, and you've done that, and now you're a much stronger person overall. The next step in being strong is being able to allow yourself to be vulnerable again when the right person comes along. You can do it. Just keep pressing forward and everything will turn out great. I always told myself that if I allowed my past relationship to ruin my future ones, then I let him win. I'm way too competitive to allow that to happen, so I used my horrible experiences to change into a better, stronger, more caring person. That way all the years of hurting weren't for nothing. If it's any encouragement, I'm now with someone who loves me and makes me feel incredibly happy and valued. You'll find that too. Other people aren't scrutinizing me any more than I'm scrutinizing them, unless you suck at driving, or wear pajamas to the grocery store. After you get through surgery, chemo, radiation, organ failure, total disability, and you can still laugh, there's nothing left to be afraid of, except spiders. Hate spiders. My grandma is going through chemo at the moment and has realized this. She went from being very filled with self-pity, rightfully so, honestly, the week before she started treatment, to baking homemade cakes and cooking dinner again a couple of days after her first treatment. I'm so proud of her. Spiders are the bug that you want. They kill everything else. When my ex-boss finally snapped and called me a pussy, I thought I never have to come here again. That was very liberating. But were you being a pussy? The real questions are in the comments once again. Today, you are you. That is truer than true. There is no one alive who is youer than you. Dr. Seuss. For the last several years, I've been immersed in a culture that thrives on uniformity and shuns individuality. It took all of the balls I had to walk away from the fundamental Baptist church. And if you want to be a coked out children's author, damn it, that is what you should be. Well, if you want to coke out, coke out. And if you want to do shrooms, do shrooms. 'Cause there be dragons in this room, you know that there are. I am not my history. It took me many years, decades, to really get this. My life improved drastically once I gave up all hope of a better past. This made my night. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease in my early 20s. I had a really hard time coping with my fear and shame. I had always been such a private person, and only time will tell how bad it will get. I was prescribed embarrassing medications, huge pills, suppositories, and rectally inserted foam. Then one day, when I was around 23, after a bout of literally crying on the floor and feeling sorry for myself, I decided not to let it control my life. My symptoms weren't even that bad, but the fear and shame were holding me back. I made a live journal entry and let about 15 of my friends see it. I came out about my disease and how I felt about it, and soon I no longer felt as much shame over it. Over the next year or so, I started feeling comfortable with bathroom humor, with willing participants. Both my sisters were diagnosed after me, and I led them through and taught them what I had learned. I'm in my 30s now and mention my Crohn's disease whenever it's relevant and appropriate. I'm no longer ashamed. I feel that. I was diagnosed with Crohn's right before starting high school, which I'd say is arguably the worst time to uncontrollably crap your pants. I was extremely lucky that my friends were so understanding, and I'm glad you were about to come to terms with it too. Also, inserting that rectal foam has got to be the weirdest feeling I've ever experienced. So what is rectal foam? Does that go in the crack or up the butt? That girls are just people like me, with insecurities and flaws. Talking to them doesn't have to be scary. That feeling though when you're walking alone and you pass a group of girls and they all start laughing after passing. Are they laughing at you? Who knows? Girl who walks with other girls here. We are not. I'm not going to feel happy all the time, and sometimes I'm going to feel bad for no reason. It's okay, and it will pass. I have a panic disorder and occasional depressive episodes, and I spent so many years thinking if only I fixed everything in my life, if only I exercised more or changed my diet, had a more positive attitude, then at some point, I got to a place where life was going really well for me. I had a job I liked, things were going well with friends and family and my boyfriend, I was cooking myself a good dinner every night and jogging regularly, was on antidepressants that were controlling the worst of my problems, and I would still get home from work some nights and think, life is miserable and pointless. It's nothing but going through the motions and waiting to die. I have nothing to look forward to. I'll just sit here and stare at the walls. Not often, but enough that it made me rethink my expectations. I had nothing left to fix, and that's when I realized how illogical and unpredictable our brains can be. There is no magic key to life, and that's okay. The realization that my parents will always be disappointed in me, no matter what I do, it really opened me up to explore who I really am, and I actually mostly like me these days. There are a few hundred things I still need to fix about myself, but not for them. I can be hated by my progenitors and still have a good life. I lived through years of working to gain some tidbit of approval from my parents. Once I gave that up and realized I deserved to give myself better, I lost a lot of my anxiety and depression. It was great. Yeah, when Damocles' sword isn't over your head anymore, a lot of the worry vanishes. There is no meaning to life, or rather, there is no objective meaning of life. You get to make your own. If there's no ultimate meaning or goal or purpose, you don't have to worry about screwing it up. George Carlin said, "People who see life as anything more than pure entertainment are missing the point." Yeah, pretty much. I'm just an NPC in someone else's story. This one messes with your head a lot. That no matter what other people think of me, I don't give a heck. The older you get, the fewer cares you have to give. No matter what I do, I'll still die in some number of years, or hours, or minutes. That the only stress and pressure in life is the stress and pressure you put on yourself changed my perspective and eventually my life. I realized that the majority of people around you don't give a single crap about what you're doing. Came to this conclusion when my best friend was always worried about people knowing when he was high. We don't really care what they're doing. Why would they care about us? It's easier to be yourself throughout the day when you know that you're just background noise in the lives of most people around you. This thought helped me when I started going to the gym. I was so self-conscious at first, but then at some point I looked up and no one was even paying attention to me. I'm literally background noise. Made things a lot easier. You can't change something that has already happened, so stop worrying about it. Life is similar to a video game. The more seriously you take it, the less enjoyable it gets. I have spent a lot of time playing video games. One of them is League of Legends. After trying for months to get better at it, climb leagues, get ahead of other players, and always win, I realized that I was not enjoying the game anymore. I realized that focusing on getting ahead of everyone made defeats feel like crap and victories feel like an obligation. I realized that the most fun I have had playing the game has been just bullcrapping with my friends on normal games, without caring so much about the outcome. In fact, the less I cared, the more I enjoyed winning and the less it bothered me to lose. And I in fact enjoyed the little things like getting killed in a stupid way, which would have gotten me into a rage when I played competitively. I made fun of my friends when they died in stupid ways instead of calling them names or just laughed at the stupidity of the situation. And when games finished, I felt more fulfilled too. I didn't feel the need to play more and rank up. This has been a thought that's been sticking with me recently. I never played video games really at all. But about a month ago, I started to play Life is Strange, and it made me realize how every little thing that you choose to do on a daily basis could leave a huge impact on your life. And you have this huge world with so many people to meet and talk to. In a video game, I would explore as much as I could and meet as many people as I could. But why wasn't I doing that in real life? Fear was the only reason I could think of. It made me want to take more chances, and hell if there was something that you can't stop thinking about doing. Go for it. I can live without him. I and my children will be okay. Then it happened, and I was without him, and we were more than okay. If life has no meaning or purpose, then you are free to give whatever meaning or purpose that you like. Toss-up. It was either I don't need this man to survive, or I don't need this substance to enjoy life. One led to my divorce. The other led to 6 months and some change without amphetamines. Good job. Stay sober, internet stranger. Nobody cares about the things I do or say because they are preoccupied with themselves and worried about what I think of them. I can be myself because it doesn't matter to anyone but me. That if I don't get to start a family, I'll have a lot of money to travel with, or to buy magic cards with. 2 years ago, I was a bit down because I was turning 37. I had no romantic prospects and running out of time to have a baby. Then it clicked one day. I don't need a husband to have a baby. My whole outlook on life changed right then and there. I got a second job to make some extra cash, found a donor, and now I have the most perfect baby girl. Life is wonderful. It doesn't matter what other people think of me, as long as I'm happy and not interfering with others. I was driving home from work one day, very, very depressed about my myriad of life issues. I looked up at the mountains and thought, those mountains were here long before I was, and they will be here long after I'm gone. What do they care if I'm having issues at work? Why do I really care? Honestly, that simple thought instantly freed my mind of all the weight it was under. We aren't saving the Earth. We're saving ourselves. The Earth will be just fine. Life will continue marching merrily along if we annihilate humanity. Well, minus all the species we drive to extinction. Creatures go extinct all the time. The only reason creatures going extinct is considered generally a bad thing, or anything other than total neutrality, is that biodiversity holds value for humans. Mother Nature doesn't care. Planet Earth doesn't care. The sun, the galaxy, and the universe don't care. The only ones we know of who care about extinction, as a concept, are us. I am but a tiny organism on a small planet circling a relatively small star in a galaxy of millions of stars, and we keep finding more galaxies. None of this matters very much. I realize that the universe is not unfair, just absurd. We think we have some deep meaning and grander purpose, but in reality, the universe doesn't even care about us. At this point, we could either despair, ignore the truth, or rebel. Screw the universe for saying that we are insignificant. I'm not going to waste my life in existential nihilism. I'm going to live my life to the fullest, even if it never matters in the long run. Or at least try. It's hard not to give in to despair, but I must try. That I don't need anyone but myself to be happy. Friends, family members, and love interests included. I was all stressed out over getting work done in time for finals, and then I realized that whether or not I got the work done or passed the class, it would all be over in a couple of weeks. The most liberating thought I had was when I realized that just because people are related to me by blood doesn't mean I can't tell them to go screw themselves, and then get in my car and drive away if they are being assholes. Gave me a lot less anxiety about visiting my parents around presidential elections. If I die right now, I am confident that I will be remembered positively by every person I know. Having kids is entirely optional. Whenever I'm out in public and I feel self-conscious about what I'm doing or how I look, I just think about the hundreds of people around me and how I'm not giving any of them a single thought, so they're probably doing the same to me. Either we are a mistake, literally a bunch of cells that got together and accidentally gained things like consciousness and a fear of death. I screw up? Who gives a crap? I'm a freak. I'm literally the universe's accidental pregnancy it had with itself and hasn't gotten around to killing yet. There is a God in heaven, and if I try my best, he's gonna know, even if my best is totally freaked up and not even close to good enough. The realization that really permanently freed me was the realization that, in a way, I don't exist. What I call me is actually nothing more than a random collection of attributes and familial, social life experiences and influences. It's like I am a leaf pile shaped by the passing breezes of life, and the personality I call me has no more significance than that leaf pile. I was getting in my car a few months ago and I looked down at myself. I had on a Destiny shirt, a Pokemon hat, a Wonder Woman lanyard, work name tag, and my Super Mario Kart key lanyard in my hand. I thought about how I was going to play D&D after my day of working at the board game store I work at, and I thought, man, I'm such a black sheep in this family. And that's who I am, and that's okay. My family loves me. My family is really into things like sports, celebrities, and the mainstream, whereas I love video games, fantasy, sci-fi, that sort of thing. I even LARP. Just the thought that it was okay to be different was just so liberating. I've always known it. It just sort of came to mind, and it was really cool. You really love branded gear. A year ago, the man I had spent the last 20 years of my life with told me that he was in love with someone else. I was gutted. I could not stop crying. After a week of crying, I had an epiphany. I wasn't crying because I had lost the love of my life. I was crying because I had given him my youth. I'm 35 and have been with him since I was 15. I took a deep breath, washed my face, and smiled. I wasn't dead. And truth be told, not that damned old. I still had time and not a single thing holding me back. I have never felt more alive and free than I did at that moment. To myself, you expect to bounce back not only to a better point than you have ever been at, but to a perfect point that no one ever achieves. Coming out of a depression and hating myself for not being perfect, I suddenly realized I was holding myself to the wrong standard. I tried quitting smoking for over 16 years without success. Finally, something clicked and I realized that after quitting smoking, I could still smoke whenever I wanted to and still be a non-smoker. All I had to do was remain dedicated to being a non-smoker instead of remaining dedicated to the addiction. After all, I realized that if an obese person goes on a diet, it doesn't mean that they can never eat ice cream again. Of course they can. And they can go on eating lots of ice cream in their lifetime. And having ice cream once in a while doesn't mean that they're going to give up on their diet. It just means that they wanted some ice cream. Just the same, quitting smoking doesn't have to mean giving up on cigarettes forever. You just have to stop defining yourself as a smoker. It's all about how we label ourselves inside of our minds, not about the things we do. Once I realized this, quitting was a piece of cake, and the odd thing was that almost immediately the cravings stopped, and I no longer enjoy smoking anymore. Once in a while, I will get a craving and have one, and blah. I find it disgusting now. Been quiet for a good 4 years now. No turning back. We are not going to matter, and no one is going to remember us after 2 generations. So go ahead and do what you want that makes you happy. Don't mind what people say. You can hold 2 opposing thoughts or opinions in your mind at the same time. Graduating high school, I'm done with the dreaded years of high school. No more miserable SAT and AP testing. No more inflexible school hours and classes. Say goodbye to these because it will be your last time. Keep dreaming. Choosing to be child-free. Before meeting my SO, it felt like an impending duty that I owed my family, considering I'm the only child of 2 only children. But she changed my entire outlook and relieved a ton of anxiety about the future. I've always said that I'd most likely be the reason my kid got kicked out of school, because I have a very low tolerance for other people and their kids, especially the kind of parents that enforce play rules and the likes. I like to choose my friends and company, and the thought of having to play nice with people I disliked, just because our kids were friends, for example, was something I genuinely dreaded. Then there's also the whole aspect of being responsible for another human being when I'm admittedly hugely selfish apart from when it comes to my SO and my family. But even that takes a huge amount of energy for me. That's just how I'm hardwired. Having kids means 0 chance for selfishness, and it would have legitimately driven me crazy, probably leading me to resent my own kids. That wouldn't have been fair on anyone. The most interesting aspect of the concept of spirituality to me is that while why is my favorite question as a scientist, it falls woefully short for the most important question, why am I here? It falls short because the answer is so simple, so painfully banal, that most people dislike the answer. Because. You are here because. Because your parents didn't die or suffer reproductive damage before you were conceived. Because neither did their parents, or the parents before that. Because somehow, unbelievably, impossibly, every single living organism in your lineage has managed to do that for the last 600 million generations. And that is just the low estimate. It's such a core-shaking concept to behold, that your essence, your lineage, your genes, and your combination of traits and experiences is literally unbroken for billions of years. Not just you, either. Every single living person and animal has the same amazing story. Millions of deaths of ancestors occurred, but before each death, one of them sent this little life baton onto the next runner before falling. You, me, and everyone we know each holds one of those batons. What makes this more powerful than any other concept to me is that it is true. It is unwaveringly, unshakably, unequivocally true. The simplicity of its truth is even more beautiful. In such an obvious stroke of logic, you can confidently state that if any one of your millions of ancestors had failed to pass the baton at the right time, you wouldn't be here reading this. The undeniable truth combined with the implicit beauty of the concept is what makes it more powerful to me than any religious tale I have ever read. Every single living thing is directly connected, not just to every other living thing, but to billions of years of time on this planet. No other creation myth even comes close to the natural poetry of this truth, and it's one of the primary reasons why there are no religions that appeal to me on a deep level. Their gods are too small for my earth. Nothing we do at a personal level really matters to our species as a whole. Technology is the driving force behind our evolution, from the agricultural revolution millennia ago to the current communications revolution of today. Whether or not Germany won or lost World War II, for example, it wouldn't have changed human destiny, merely changed the route in an extremely minor way. Our species is headed towards a cybernetic transformation, and nothing is going to stop it. What is the strangest thing that happened to you that you can't logically explain? When I was in college, a wasted dude fell from a third-floor balcony and got up and walked away like it was nothing. Seriously, one of the weirdest/freakish things I've ever seen in my life. It's getting late, guys. Oh, this is my floor. See you tomorrow! I had recently watched an early episode of Criminal Minds where an arsonist would lock people in their homes before lighting the house on fire. For whatever reason, it kinda got to me. A night or two later, I woke up out of a dead sleep and couldn't get that episode out of my mind, so I finally decided to just get up and check the front door. I swear I could not open the door. Unlocked it, but it was totally stuck. I woke up my husband because I was so freaked out. He also tried and couldn't get the door open, and he's a big guy. I ended up climbing out a window so I could push the door from the outside while he pulled from the inside. We finally got it open. I didn't watch Criminal Minds for a long time after that. I really hope this answer blows up just so thousands of people across the world go to open their front door for no reason. There's at least one. My door is good though. I hit a patch of black ice in the dark going 60 miles per hour down the highway. At the time, I drove a 1-ton cargo van. It hit the guardrail and flipped. Not only did I walk away without a scratch, but the car was also drivable and I was only 30 minutes late to work. Do a barrel roll. You're becoming more like your father. Had a dream that I got a phone call saying my brother, that I haven't seen in like 10 years, had died. 2 days later, I got a call that he actually had died. My dad claims to have had this twice. Not a call, but he was actually visited by the deceased in a dream. They were always happy in their dream. Then he would learn of their non-illness related sudden death after waking up. I'm sorry for your loss. I too had a similar dream. In the dream, my mom called me to tell me that my grandpa was dying. When I woke up, I called her and asked how grandpa was doing. She said he was doing just fine. Well, as it turned out, my stepdad's father was not doing well and was put on hospice shortly not long after that dream. So while I had never referred to him as my grandpa, he was a grandfatherly figure, and he passed away within a few months of that dream. I used to fence. The sport, not stolen goods. I was at a tournament and had just started a bout against a competitor. You win the bout by being the first to 5 points. I score what I believe to be the first point, but the official indicates that the match is over and I've won. I stood there confused for a second, but my opponent seems to agree and salutes and approaches for a handshake, so I go along with it. I check the scorecard and it says I've won 5-2. Totally lost probably 4 to 5 minutes of time. Hasn't happened since, to the best of my knowledge, but it's been 20 years and I still wonder what had happened. I had something similar happen to me. I was cleaning my mom's shop, like I had done hundreds of times, and just as I started to sweep, I looked down to the floor and it had already been swept and everything cleaned. Lost like 15 to 20 minutes. Still don't know what happened. Brains are lazy and sometimes don't bother to record something entirely routine. Happens a lot to people driving. They just go on autopilot and wake back up once they arrive. Both of my lungs collapsed at the same time, almost over 50% collapsed, and I was walking around like I was perfectly normal, until I decided to go to the ER for bubble sounds in my chest. None of the doctors could figure out why this had happened to me. They didn't know how I was just up and walking around laughing. This happened to my brother. He said he was getting a cold but felt fine. His voice sounded really weird though, and it felt like he had plastic under his skin in his chest. Crepitus, I guess it's called. Ended up in the hospital for a few days, but felt fine the whole time. Doctors have no idea what caused it. I've had that plastic feeling in my chest for 3 years now. It felt like my lung collapsed when I was tripping on acid and took a really big hit from a bong. It hurt like hell until the next morning. Then it just felt weird, and I continued my life like normal. Every time I smoke now, it feels really bad in my chest. I once went to the doctor to take a chest x-ray, but I don't remember ever having gotten the results. It was like a year ago, and I just assumed everything was okay since they didn't contact me afterward. I also had an asthma test where they tested the power of my lungs or something, but it was normal. My lungs still feel weird as heck, but I've just accepted it. I just assume that I've gone crazy and it's all in my head since I function normally. I've tried to explain the feeling to doctors, but they just look at me like I'm crazy. Time slipped by my friend and me one day. We got a contract in another town and drove out daily for 2 weeks. It was 1 hour to get there and 1 hour back, but one day it took us 3 hours to get back to town. My friend realized something was wrong when his wife called him up asking why he had turned his phone off and why he was so late. We left a little before 2 p.m. and the call came almost 5 p.m. To this day, we can't explain it, and to further complicate matters, we both have receipts from a gas station we stopped at just before we got on the highway that is timestamped a bit after 2 p.m. My theory is that the aliens took us for 2 hours, but who the hell knows? I had that happen once. I worked at a coffee shop and lived a few blocks away, so I normally just walk to work. It takes no more than 10 to 15 minutes tops, and I like to get there early so I can chill and have a coffee before my shift starts. I left home 45 minutes early, looked at the clock before heading out, and it was 2. Walked in the door to my manager asking me why the hell I was late. Looked at the clock and it was 3. There's no way it's even humanly possible to turn a 10-minute 5-block walk into an hour. Like, I have no idea. I even checked my clocks at home after work. None were off or broken, and it never happened again. I was driving across the US and drove into Salt Lake City. For whatever reason, I got a craving for IHOP, so I punched it into Google Maps and followed the directions to a spot in the middle of town. I walk in, and the place is empty. I don't mean like there were no customers. I mean there is literally not a person in the place. No waitstaff, no customers, no cooks, nobody. There was partially eaten food on all the tables, bags and purses in the booths, TVs on everywhere, burgers on the grill slowly burning, and there wasn't a soul in the place, like they all just vanished at once. I was so freaked out I hopped in my car and drove until I hit the Nevada border before stopping to eat. Still have no idea what the heck happened. That's Twilight Zone stuff right there. Or the place was robbed and everyone was in the walk-in freezer. I was just a 6-year-old kid deciding what to do after school while I was in my grandparents' living room. I saw a red flash shoot out of the wall and go from that side to the other wall and into it. A second later, a big earthquake hit. I saw some sort of visual shockwave from the earthquake, and no, it wasn't those weird lightning ball things. In my childish mind, I thought that I had just seen the Flash, the comic book character, run through the room. Another cool one that is explained by sheer unbelievable coincidence is that I phoned a friend whom I hadn't spoken to in at least 3 years and it went to voicemail. After I left a voicemail, I saw I had a voicemail notification. It was a voicemail from the person who I had just called. The weirdest part is that we must have called each other at exactly the same moment, otherwise it would have done the call waiting for a thing instead of sending to voicemail. We immediately called each other back and tripped out about how weird that was. Several times when I had a landline, I picked up the phone to call my friend, only to hear her voice already on the phone. Literally picked it up to call her as she called me, so it never even rang on my end. Yes, I remember this happening with landlines too. Pick up the phone, dial my friend's number, and then just hear them breathe as we're both just waiting for the ring. I once shut my ear in a car door. No idea how. Have tried to recreate it and can't. But my God, that hurt. You deserve something for this. So this still baffles me, but when I was a kid, we had moved into a new house, and while the realtor was showing us around the new house, I saw a lady sitting at a white dresser in a pink room, and she even waved at me, but when I asked my mom who that was, she just brushed me off because she was trying to listen to the realtor. The weird thing is that there were no rooms painted pink in the house, and my family just played it off despite me being adamant about what I saw. Anyway, fast forward a few years and I'm in high school at this point. We start renovating the house, and while stripping the wallpaper in the master bedroom, we found out it was painted pink at some point. Still low-key freaks me out. Damn, that's scary. When I was younger, in elementary school, I used to have the same dream every weekend starting on Saturday, when I would go to sleep, and then waking up in the middle of the night on Sunday and throwing up. The dream was always a bunch of numbers. Not even anything happening, just a bunch of random jumbled up numbers all over the place. I never understood why that happened, where the same dream would happen on the same night every week and I would throw up every single time. I always think about it and wonder what it was, or if it was just some weird coincidence. Also, I would not have any signs of being sick before or after. Maybe someone else has experienced this? The numbers, Mason! What do they mean? Literally just heard a colleague of mine yell this at another. Considering the subject of this thread, I felt it was worth mentioning. My dad owned a small garden shop, so I'd stay behind the checkout after school till the shop closed. This was until I see a tall man wearing all black like a trench coat, walking past my dad and smiling at me before going into a staff-only area. I jump up to stop him even though I was 7. The back area is filled with new shipments. I turn the corner but nobody is there. There was nowhere he could have gone. I asked my dad to check the CCTV after closing, but it's only shown me jumping up and running out of the frame. Weird stuff. Never felt comfortable there again. One time when I was little, I had a similar experience. I had fallen asleep on the couch and woke up in the middle of the night. When I got up to go to the kitchen, I saw a black silhouette of a woman with a bun and glasses, and she went into the kitchen, and I heard all of the pans fall. I rush into the kitchen. No one is there, and everything is in its place. I know I could have imagined the figure, but I cannot explain the sound of the crashing pans, and no one else heard it if they were all asleep. It was probably a waking dream since you had just gotten up from sleep. The best I got is having some obscure song in my head and turning on the radio and that song is playing. Or discussing an old movie with a friend and coming home scrolling through the TV at 3 a.m. and you see that very same movie is playing. Just crap like that, really. In the book American Gods, there is a part where they talk about how there's a TV show you might want to try to start watching, but every time you catch it on TV, you see the same episode every time. I know it's happened to me several times. Similar pattern to what you're talking about. Driving with the hubby and I see a bunch of bikers having a cookout. Out of the blue, and I don't know why I said this, people look down on bikers, but I bet if the house across the street catches fire, this man would run into it and save the little old lady, and I pointed to the house. That was the first time I'd ever driven down that street. We'd just moved to the neighborhood. My husband and I weren't even talking, just listening to music. That night at 2 a.m., that house I pointed to burned down and an elderly woman died. Asshole bikers probably just continued grilling. Yeah, I hope the granny left a bitter taste in their mouth. I have a vivid memory of being at the Statue of Liberty as a child, on my dad's shoulders, seeing the skyline of New York City. I remember what we ate for lunch that day, etc. I remember the ferry that we took. I've always thought about this memory and talked about it, but my family denies that I ever went to New York City. I didn't go for the first time until I was 23, but strangely enough, when I went, I remember everything just how it had been when I was there with my dad. Same. Had a Thanksgiving where my whole extended family came to visit from Minnesota and Wisconsin. Live in Michigan. But my whole family denies it ever happened. My uncle even taught me how to throw a punch with my thumb on the outside of my fingers so I don't break them. Ever have the feeling that sometimes we drift into another reality? This happened a couple of days ago, and I'm really hoping someone can tell me there is a perfectly logical reason for it to have happened. I got a second monitor since the class is all online now. I was moving my floor lamp when the cement fell out of the bottom. Weird, but okay. I got that lamp from my aunt. I then grabbed another floor lamp from my guest room that I've had since like 2007, and as soon as I stepped through the threshold to my room, the floor lamp's bottom dropped out. Crazy! I asked my SO to borrow one of his he isn't using. Guess what happened when we got to my place with it? Yep, that's right, the bottom fell out. This is gonna be the most boring story on this thread, I can feel it. 3 lamps and it happens to all of them? I have absolutely no idea unless someone is trying to prank you. Let us know if you get to the bottom of it. When I was in primary school, like years 1 to 2, in the cafeteria there were all these cups filled with milk every lunch. Red, green, blue, but only one yellow cup. Everyone would fight to get to the yellow cup like it was the holy grail, and it had been this way for years. One night I had a dream that the cafeteria had gotten more yellow cups in, and lo and behold, the next day, hundreds of yellow cups. I wonder if you overheard someone at the school saying that they were getting more yellow cups. Our brains are incredible. You could have stored that information without even noticing. I think it's also a trick going on with the prophecies people think they have, because you aren't good at remembering, but you have a million thoughts a minute that you just always forget. But if you see something that's especially noteworthy, you will remember if you considered that was a possibility, or even make up a memory that you predicted that. No one can know they predicted something until after it's happened, and by the time it's happened, it's highly unlikely that they're remembering their prophecy correctly. When I was 10, I had a radio and a beanbag chair in my room. As I was starting to fall asleep, the radio suddenly changed the channel multiple times before I heard the beanbag chair in my room slowly fold in on itself, making the noise a beanbag chair would make if someone were to sit in it. Not sure what caused this, but certainly freaked me out. I always put my keys in the same spot whenever I get home from work. Doesn't matter if they're originally in my pocket, purse, or hand, they always go into the dish that sits next to the TV in my living room. One night I had been home from work for a few hours and was cooking dinner when the thought of, "Where did you put your keys?" popped in my mind. There was no reason for this because I knew where they were, but when I stuck my head around the corner to check, no keys in the key dish. I started looking around thinking maybe I dropped them in a little too hard and they bounced out, but they were nowhere to be found in the area. I expand my search to the kitchen, my bedroom, and my purse, and they're absolutely nowhere. I was home alone. Both of my roommates had been out of town for a few days, so they couldn't have moved them. I drove home from work and unlocked the door myself, so they had to be in the house somewhere. I kept looking for nearly 4 hours in every drawer, every handbag, every pants pocket with no results. Finally, when I was about to give up my search, I shook one of the coats hanging in the back of my closet only to hear a familiar jangle. They were inside the breast pocket of my heaviest winter coat that I hadn't worn in months. This happened in early August, and that coat hadn't even been touched since mid-February at the latest. When I was about 8, my sister and I made a fort in my room, and we both stayed up past dark. We were bored of just looking out my window to people watch, when in the middle of our yard we saw this shimmering mass in the shape of a person facing our direction, or the opposite, hard to tell. We were both so dumbfounded and amazed at what we were looking at, but sadly it only lasted about 15 seconds before whatever it was decided to just take off straight into the sky, leaving the sparkling trail behind it. After about 20 years of not speaking about it, my sister randomly says, "Do you remember when we were little and we saw that shining thing in our yard?" I never brought it up since it happened because people would have just said we imagined the tooth fairy or something. Definitely not. Okay, can anyone explain this? I tried searching for this on Google but came up with nothing of value. About 2 years ago, I was on the highway at night. There are barely any buildings around and the sky is pretty clear to see. Most nights it's empty with only 2 stars and maybe the moon. Anyway, on this particular night, I look up to see the significantly large rip or tear in the sky. I can't tell how big it was, but considering width, I'd say about 3 moons wide. This thing was literally glowing orange like the sun during sunset, but without the light. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like neon orange chalk on a blackboard. It was freaky as crap, and Abish thought the aliens were coming. I didn't click a pic, unfortunately. There are seriously so many things that have happened to me in the past decade that I don't even know which tops what, but more recently some cuts magically appeared on my arm out of nowhere. I mean, I was just sitting at my desk and noticed that my arm was itchy. I looked down and there are these crisscrossing red lines all over. I've actually told this story before on Reddit and posted a picture of my arm. It was a couple of days after the cuts appeared because I was still trying to be reasonable, but I'm done with that now. I actually have a lot of stories like this, along with some interesting theories, but I have no proof of anything, so it's all just my word. I've actually been thinking about doing a regular livestream Q&A to talk about this stuff, because I was at a support group openly talking about it, and was surprised at how liberating it was to just openly talk about it and answer questions about it. Maybe doing it in your sleep? Set up a camera to see. Was working in a McDonald's. A customer had dropped their Coke and I was mopping it up. My colleague was still behind the counter. He screamed, looked down, and told me that a staircase had appeared. Our eyes locked when he walked down it. He disappeared behind the counter and came up again. When I looked, the stairs were gone. Totally freaked me out. Also, he could detach his thumb. I think I met that guy. He could detach and reattach my nose. Crazy crap. So 3 years ago, my dad and my brother and I booked a campsite up in the White Mountains in New Hampshire for 2 nights because we were going to go down to New York and camp with my cousins after. The campsite only allowed a minimum of 3-day bookings, but for whatever reason they said we can only do 2 nights if you take campsite 42. So we sat and wondered what was wrong with site 42, and we got there. Nothing was wrong. We stayed the nights and left for New York. We got to New York and saw the number of campsites we got. It was 42. To this day, we have a running joke in the family about campsite 42. I don't know if it's a glitch in my reality, or if I happen to have a consciousness jump to parallel universes on occasion and just notice it. However, I have seen things go from being physical objects to paintings and vice versa. It's usually a very small detail that does that. Plus, I have definitely experienced pop-in while driving. As you'd see in video games where the engine tries to save on resources and doesn't load in a higher quality version of an object before the camera pans over or gets closer to it. I've always wondered if things that used to make perfect sense to me suddenly are completely different because my mind either moved too many universes away from my original experience that it no longer is recognizable, yet is familiar somehow, or that this game is updating and I am noticing the changes as they occur, or am one of the unlucky ones that are experiencing errors and glitching. Personally, if this is a simulation, I don't know how I'd feel if I suddenly was to wake up to reality. I might not have my family or friends. The memories and feelings would be real, but their existence intangibly and significance would be called into question by those who never experienced it themselves. Basically, I might feel like it was everything, whereas others might consider it nothing. There is also the chance that when I die and get forced into reality, I have only been playing for a couple of hours rather than years, and I will suddenly realize this and not feel as emotionally attached to the experience. At that point, is what I am feeling now, sorrow, just extra code to make me want to continue my game or give it a high-scoring review? Or do I actually feel and think these things because I do genuinely like this program? This is why people are not told to think about things too hard. Confusion over existence can be as deep or shallow as you want it, and paying too much attention might bring up more questions than answers. One time in high school, I turned on the radio in the morning and a song I like came on. Don't really remember, but I think it was Taylor Swift. Later in the day, I remembered that and turned on the radio again, and it was playing again. Turned it on a few hours later and the same exact thing happened. It was the only 3 songs that I heard that day. It felt so weird. But I'm sure it's honestly not that rare given how often radio stations play popular songs throughout the day. When did you become the very thing you swore to destroy? The day I told my daughter she can't have ice cream for breakfast. But you can definitely do ice cream for dinner. Ice cream and a can of fruit cocktail is my go-to dinner if I'm ever getting over a flu and haven't been eating much. I tried to quit smoking using Chantix in 2008 and 2009. It didn't work because the nightmares were so graphic and scary. I had 2 before I stopped taking it. I don't remember the first one, but in the second one, I killed a guy by removing his limbs very slowly. It really grossed me out. Didn't realize I was capable of that sort of barbarity even in some unlocked portion of my mind. Now I do autopsies for a living. It's weird that elements of my absolute worst nightmare is part of my day-to-day. Had a cop ask me to remove a guy's hands a couple of weeks ago, and it's literally not even crossed my mind a second time until just now. A few years ago, I would say, yo, ironically, to make fun of people who said yo. Now I start almost every conversation with, yo dude. I can't count how many cringy habits I've started this way. The line between using ooh-woo, ironically, and seriously grows thin every minute. My entire life while growing up, all I wanted to do was be a police officer. Received my bachelor's in political science and minored in legal studies and criminal justice. Received my master's in criminal justice. Scored top 5 in physical and written exams at every agency I applied. No criminal history and no previous drug use. I was denied by every single agency. Entered law school and applied for an internship at a DA's office while in law school. Was denied. Passed the bar and applied at the district attorney's office as a criminal prosecutor. Denied even though I had criminal law experience and my courses emphasized criminal law. Now I am a criminal defense attorney. If you can't join them, beat them. I actually have a friend that had a similar-ish thing happen, but they didn't end up becoming a DA. Basically made themselves overqualified to be a cop. Kind of explains a lot of things in America. I make video games, and 95% of my career has been on consoles. Had to help out a team at work a few years back with a mobile game, and they made me add in the bit where the pop-up comes up asking you to rate the game. I died a lot inside then. Much better than those pinheads adding ads with no close signs. I hope they get an ad too. Or when they know when you're going to be touching the screen in a specific area, and they throw an ad right in there. Just in that perfect time when your brain has made the decision to move your finger, and before your finger has hit the screen. I used to hate grumpy old guys. Now, I don't even have kids, and I found my mother coming out of my mouth to my nieces and nephews. It's appalling. I feel like Nick from New Girl. I'm looking forward to getting old. I'm just growing into my personality. When I got put in charge of people at work, I said I was going to be a cool boss. And then I realized that there's a lot more to it and these idiots are up and I have to answer for it. This hits home. Working from the bottom, you make good friends and you all swear you won't be that pinhead who is the boss. Then you get promoted and become that pinhead. The way I see it is to take the knowledge you got from your boss and don't do the dumb stuff you hated. But all in all, you just gotta be the boss, not a Michael Scott. I'll paste this here. Replied to another comment, but figured you might want to rethink seeing yourself as the pinhead. Being a cool boss isn't reasonable. You do have to be the one to hold people's feet to the fire. But you can be the fair, honest boss who actually gives a heck about the people who work for you. I had 120 people working underneath me, and typically people saw me as the hard guy to work for, in that I always had high expectations. But they also knew that I did not micromanage them, and that I knew each and every one of them personally, and was able to better develop them as a result. As each of them moves up over time in various other positions and places, I get emails, phone calls, and messages thanking me for helping them see what right looks like. I myself merely modeled my behavior after those who were my supervisors, and I believe that I was able to influence them to be actually effective leaders as a result. That's ultimately the legacy I live for anyways. Whatever the work is, doesn't matter, because no matter how much money you make, life is ultimately about the legacy that you are able to leave improving the lives of others, not about hitting the #1 spot on some report card. If you take care of the people underneath you, you'll hit that #1 spot as a side effect. Be that kind of boss. I always said I'd never been a pet person, but we're fostering a cat while its owner is in the hospital, and now it's 1 a.m. and I'm on the sofa with Buddy cuddling up to me, and yeah, it's kinda cool. When you have something cuddling against you, it just releases something in your brain that's just like, I really like this. I vehemently insisted that leggings weren't pants and should only be worn with dresses or skirts. 10 years, 1 baby, and 1 pandemic later? Sure, they're pants. They're practically formal wear at this point. This made me realize that the leggings as the pants thing has been around for a decade. It was such a debate when I was in college. Please don't force me to confront that this is the same as saying a decade ago. Not with the all caps. I'm not ready for any part of my adult life to be an all caps amount of time ago. When they offered me 6 figures and a vehicle, as in action figures and a Hot Wheels car, or maybe it was a larger vehicle to go with the action figures. In the late 80s and early 90s, I was a typical skater punk metalhead teen. I swore up and down I would never settle down. I didn't want some 9-to-5 life with the house and family. I am happily married, have a great career, and love every second of it. There are times when I sort of wonder what my life would have been if I just kept doing what I was doing, but I'm pretty sure I would be miserable. Screwing around and partying is fun when you are 17 to 23, but in my 40s, screw that. I'm tired. God, I partied a lot my freshman year. Now 10 years later, I can have a couple of drinks and have a good time, but any more than that and I'll be paying for it for days. I partied non-stop from 19 to 21. At 35, I have half a can of White Claw and want to nap on the couch. So old, so boring. I used to be anti-smartphone. Now, if it's not by my side, I go crazy. You sound exactly like my mom. In one breath, she'll say, "Look at everyone glued up their phones." Then in one swift move, pull her phone out. I love my mom, but man, it's annoying. It feels so crazy to me since when I was a kid, I wasn't even allowed to watch TV while eating. But now my parents can't even get through their favorite TV shows without using their phones, and it's like the rest of the world developed ADD or ADHD when I grew out of it. I used to hate poached eggs and Eggs Benedict. Boy, was I an idiot. My adult diet consists mostly of things I hated as a child, and the few things I don't like are the stuff I loved as a kid. Seriously though, how did I like cottage cheese? Man, how did you do it? I'm 44 and I choke down my vegetables because I know I need to, but man, I'd eat like a 6-year-old every day if I could. Chicken tenders and pizza round the clock. I don't think I've managed to acquire a single taste. I installed Snapchat. I've honestly really come to like Snapchat. It makes it easier to stay in contact with friends who live really far away, but it feels a lot less performative and more personal than Instagram and other platforms. That's exactly how I feel about it. People around me are all on Insta for sharing pics, but there's something about Snapchat that leaves things in the moment. I always said I hated people who were just content in their jobs and didn't want to rise up. I love the work I do, and I want to get to the highest skill set in it, but frankly, I'm not sure if I am interested in a real promotion at this point in my life. That's how I've always been because, What's the point in working yourself to death? That would be wasting my life and my time with my friends and family. There's so much I have left to do in this lifetime. A job just allows me to do those things. Same here. I'm perfectly content with the boring life of a grunt if it means the bills still get paid. I understand working a dream job, but when you love what you do at work, what do you do outside of work? Don't people like that get burnt out? I bought Crocs and a weed whacker on the same day. End me now. Anyone can be a father, but it takes Crocs and a weed whacker to become a dad. 2 years ago, I put down new grass in the small part of the front yard that I own. I sat down, picked up a book, and read a bit in the garden. When I looked up, my nephew from next door was rolling across my freshly laid down patch of grass. I told him to get off my lawn. I was 26. Age happens faster than you think. I'm a new house owner. I've just recently been finding poop in my yard from a dog I don't own. It's really pissing me off. I'll start this by saying I'm a dog owner. I own 2 medium-large mixed breeds and clean up after them myself without issue. Our old neighbor refused to fix their fence and their dog preferred to come to our yard and do his business. I don't blame the dog. He didn't know any better because of his crap owners. My best friend and I were out planting flowers she had brought from her garden, and her 8-month-old son almost rolled in poo. That was it. I proceeded to grab a shovel and start flinging it over the fence at their house, screaming obscenities at them. Not my proudest moment, and no, they did not learn their lesson, but damn it, it felt so good to get that out of my system and yard. Drank a crap ton of milk when I was a kid because I believed lactose intolerant people were wimps. Lo and behold, I'll crap my pants if I have a glass of milk nowadays. There is lactose-free milk, yo. That's all that we buy in this house. 3 kids, my wife and me, all lactose intolerant. I've tried that, and all of the lactose-free ones I've found have a very off-putting flavor to them. I used to hate the concept of anime, even though I didn't realize Pokemon was one. Now I read manga like nobody's business and spend my Sunday evenings doing nothing but watching the newest seasonal episodes. Do you have a hentai addiction yet? Everyone knows you find anime through hentai, not the other way around. When I picked up smoking at the age of 17, same here, but I took it up at 16. Best friend and I always swore we wouldn't, and we were constantly bugging her dad and my mum to quit. Both of us ended up as smokers, and eventually both of our parents quit. Please, for the sake of your future family, work hard to quit. My father died a 1.5 years ago from terminal lung cancer caused by smoking. He died a horrific, painful death in my arms that has haunted me ever since. He had quit smoking too late, insisting, "I'll go to the doctor when I quit smoking." He quit smoking just in time to be diagnosed terminal and was dead a month later. When I vacuumed up a Lego and was like, they're like $5 a piece these days. That crap's expensive. The average is around 10 cents a piece. I do own a few pieces that are $70+ though, and yeah, they're ridiculously expensive. I think if you did the math, Lego beats the value of gold. Won the 8th grade poetry slam by writing a poem about my anger towards my grandfather for drinking and smoking himself to death. By my 22nd birthday, I was putting down 2 packs of cigarettes and a pint every day. Now, I'm 3 months sober and clean from cigs though. Congratulations on the milestone. Good luck keeping it up, though luck may or may not have much to do with it. At my night job, we have a worker who has a bit of a panhandling issue, always setting up a tip jar and giving sob stories in order to get more tips. Keep in mind, this job is not what you would reasonably call a job where we depend on tips. We are paid properly by our employers. Usually, the first thing I would do when relieving her shift is put away the tip jar, because I'm not about to try and separate my regulars from even more of their money. But I got tired of seeing her walk out with a wad of cash that's assuredly put her at a much higher take-home than me. Having over 4 years seniority on her, and well, I do the brunt of the labor for the whole place. So what do? I retreated from my high road like a bish and started leaving the tip jar out, putting my own first dollar in there to fish for more every night. It's been working. No sob story from me about it though. Hey, if it works, it works. To be fair, I'm not much of a tipping person. It isn't much of a thing where I'm from, but I do understand the fact that sometimes you need to go the extra step to bring home something extra. Appreciate you not choosing the sob story route. Good luck, and I hope things get better for both of you. Working for a personal chef company, but also wanting to eat the rich. I'm not eating them, I'm feeding them. Preparing them for slaughter. No point in butchering a skinny cow. My parents are African, and they always made the food so spicy when I was a kid. Now I'm like, this meal needs more cayenne. And scotch bonnets. Bruh, same. I'm like a white dude. Was never big on spice. Started dating my Asian girlfriend about 5 years ago, and now I will legit eat anything that looks like it's going to burn my face off. Back in my late teens / the early 20s, I was fully anti-establishment, listening or playing in a punk band, anti-consumerism, and wearing shirts with the hammer and sickle. Now I have an impressive investment portfolio. If you can't beat them, join them. I didn't sell out, I bought it in. I used to find it weird that people got depressed over not having a BF or GF and desperately looking for one. 5 to 6 months ago, my relationship of 2.5 years ended, and I am all alone. I feel kinda lonely and down. I feel like I need a romantic relationship, but there is COVID, so I hardly see people. I am not yet desperately looking for a relationship, but I am heading that way. I don't know if this helps, but here goes. I used to be that dude too. I was very desperate to get in a relationship because that way I'd have unrestricted affection and care and love, etc. But I wasn't able to ever find one. I thought that I needed to be in a relationship. It wasn't until some deep thinking that I realized that I was actually loved. I remember my parents and what they do for me. No one will ever love me like my parents. And I remember my friends. They were always very supportive and tried their best to be understanding even though we were all just high schoolers. I don't need a girlfriend. I know now that I am already loved and appreciated by my parents and friends. Even when I fail to meet their expectations, they pick me up and try to make things better. They love me for who I am. I hope you have friends and family who are like that too. Just like most other people, I thought I'd always be super laid back, always up for anything and super energetic for hours, off 2 to 4 hours of sleep. When I was a senior in high school, I worked a bunch of overtime on top of school, and still went out with my friends. Now I work fewer hours, rarely have the energy to see my friends, and most of the time I feel like a grumpy old introvert. I used to hate the post office, thinking they were lazy because they were protected by a union. When the Rona hit last year, lost my job and started working for the post office. It's an incredibly stable job, and I can assure you postal workers are very hard workers. Truthfully, even when I was more or less anti-union, I still respected postal workers. Walking and delivering mail in all sorts of weather and dealing with difficult people and animals takes a lot of willpower. Even working the front area of the post office requires a lot of willpower. Waiting in line a few times at my post office, I've seen my fair share of crapheads. I hated hippies when I was young. Long story, but it was my upbringing. Ended up joining the US Peace Corps and discussing this with my friend while we were 2 months into our service. At the time, we were smoking weed. I was wearing a Hard Rock Nashville shirt with a peace sign on it and listening to some Dave Matthews. He was laughing so hard. That's when I realized I am who I am. I was being hypocritical for years. I'm a citizen of the world. I'm in a fairly hilarious position where hippies is my general stance, but our political/social objectives are largely aligned. I used to laugh at veiny, hyper-muscular guys at the gym, dropping weights, grunting unnecessarily loud, carrying a whole sup bag to the gym for an hour workout, but now, 5 years later, it's me. So you know you do it, but still drop the weights, huh? And moan like a bear with a hernia? My grandpa died due to complications of smoking. I had always said I hate smoking and still do, but I've been stressed due to a lot of things happening at the same time in my life, and I have picked up smoking. I've smoked for 25 years, and my advice is to quit while you can and do something healthier to deal with stress, like drinking alone while watching game shows. My dad liked to do awful impressions of Disney characters that he spent way too much time teaching himself. He told me that as a kid, he was often lonely and did this as a way to make himself laugh. I yelled at him when he did it. A decade after his death, I realized that I'm constantly doing awful impressions of characters from games and cartoons I liked as a kid. You should hear my impression of Strong Bad.
No, you really should not.
As a kid, I was super against anything even vaguely girly. I was the goddamn cootie police. Now I'm a fan of My Little Pony. My BIL is freakishly against anything girly for his son. He wants a pink cap or Elsa doll. Dad will not have any of it. I can't see this ending in anything but either my nephew being super anti-traditional masculinity or super repressed, the latter of which I'll do everything I can to make sure doesn't happen. My nephew's grandparents are like this, into the stereotypical gender roles. They always get him trucks and boy toys. When my SIL had another baby, I bought my nephew his own baby to take care of. He named his doll Gary and insisted on putting him in his car seat when his mom got the new baby in his car seat. I'm glad he enjoyed baby Gary, and hopefully my gift was his grandparents too. There is nothing wrong with a little boy practicing being a dad. I used to be a Republican. Not like far right, but I was fairly conservative and thought liberals were a bunch of crybabies. I now vote mostly Democrat and find myself absolutely not able to relate to the Republican way of thinking anymore. I didn't leave the Republican Party. The Republican Party left me. Quote from Ronald McDonald. Thought the vegetarians eating salad stereotype was obnoxious, so I refused to eat them on a weird principle. Now, still vegetarian, but have a love for salads. I was definitely missing out before. I'm pretty darn far from vegetarian, but I love me a salad. I used to refuse to use emojis. Now I love certain emojis. I use emojis all the time on Reddit precisely because it bothers people here. When I missed my daughter's 4th birthday to attend a week-long work conference, the next year my daughter asked if I was going to miss her birthday again. Incredibly, the conference was happening in the same week. Instead, I quit the position, reduced work travel, and swore to never miss a family event again. All my work colleagues questioned what I was doing. 10 years later, I can say with absolute certainty that I made the right choice. When I got a mortgage, the gun lobby also says people need to be able to protect their property, Rock said, but every mass shooting is done by guys who live with their mother, so I believe you should need to have a mortgage to buy a gun. A mortgage is a real background check. Even if you go to jail for 30 years, you've still got to pay your freaking mortgage. Chris Rock. My parents always told me the cartoons I watch were pretty ridiculous, like SpongeBob, Invader Zim, Pokemon, and Ren and Stimpy. I was gonna be the cool adult and let kids watch all the hip cartoons just like I did. Fast forward a few years and I'm seeing my little cousins watch stuff like Teen Titans Go, Powerpuff Girls Reboot, and Loud House 24/7, and I want to rip my hair out every time I see those. TikToks are hilarious, but I just can't bring myself to download it. Yeah, this is what I've been saying. I've never understood Reddit's irrational hatred for anything on TikTok. I know there was possibly sketchy stuff with the company, but I mean that applies to some extent with every mainstream social media company. But as a platform, it's like any social media. There's a variety of content catering to different people. I ended up with $1 million and realized, hey, wait, this is only $1 million. Why did I want to hunt down all the millionaires? Some people probably had to work really hard to get to this point. Now I'm all for hunting down the billionaires instead. I was a Mormon missionary who tried to convince people who left the church to come back. I haven't been to church in over a year, and my coffee and liquor collections are coming along nicely. Don't lecture me, Obi-Wan. I see through the lies of the Jedi. I do not fear the dark side as you do. I have brought peace, justice, freedom, and security to my new empire. Your new empire? Okay, so when I was younger, my mom used to call on me and my sisters for every little thing you could imagine. We swore she was the evil stepmother, and we were her Cinderella. Long story short, I take care of my nephew who is 7 years old. I call him for the most simplest things in the world, like turning off the light. I now have become the evil stepmother. I'll never be like those secular kids who listen to evil music like Linkin Park or My Chemical Romance. 10 years later, I'm an emo music listening ex-Catholic. My 14-year-old self was proud, arrogant, and could get away with holding very strong opinions and could get away with being abrasive with them. Naturally, I had a lot of people who I marked as inferior or enemies. Today, I think I would be in the crosshairs of my past self. I used to have extremely strong moral principles, to a ridiculous degree. I said I would never swear. Nowadays, I don't really have that barrier, but also understand when to use it for effect. You lose that effect by swearing 24/7. I also said I would never ever be violent, or even threaten violence. Later, I threatened to punch my bully in the face in front of the whole class, and now I'm learning martial arts, so I would have a last resort if push comes to shove. I used to insult depressed people, autistic and ADHD people for having little self-control. You get the idea. Guess who's seeking help now for mental health problems to get back on their feet? Let's just say that if my early teenage self saw who I was today, I'm the person he'd hate the most. I guess it only makes sense that out of the teens that I work with, the few who seem to gradually build a dislike for no reason are the ones who I see the most of my past teenage self in. I used to think people were up on their high horses when they would passionately talk about or protest social institutional reform issues. I'd wonder why they didn't just leave it alone or get on with their lives. After learning more about those same issues and realizing how messed up they are, I'm now one of those people. When I dropped out of high school, I thought people who went to college were such losers, and I would never fall for the scam that is higher education. Took a few years of minimum wage jobs, and seeing where that mindset often led people made me realize maybe I should reconsider. Third-year pre-med student, still a loser though. So I was right about that, I guess.
Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.